The last thing Daniel Keene remembered of his old world was the soft, exhausted hum of his apartment's air conditioner and the smell of coffee gone cold beside his keyboard. He had been online for 41 hours straight, deep in the in-game raid of Cathedrals of Eldermark, the MMO he had played for 11 years. His guild had finally cleared the world lock, the rumored hidden encounter said to gate the 8th Age content. The reward was a single class token of the player's choice. Daniel had laughed at his screen. Reliquary, he had said aloud, clicking the box that everyone else in his guild had called madness. Reliquary was a meme class, a walking inventory bag. The lore said it was world-locked, which the datamine files clarified to mean a single reliquary could exist in the game world at any time, and no one had ever rolled it. Theory crafters had spent a decade arguing whether it was actually playable or just flavor text. Daniel had spent 5 of those years writing forum posts about why it was secretly the strongest class in the game. If you knew where every lesser relic and greater relic was hidden across the 7 kingdoms, and if you could survive the early game with literally no offensive abilities. He had laughed. He had clicked the box. The game had crashed. The light had gone out of the screen, and the light had gone out of the room, and the light had gone out of Daniel Keene. He did not remember dying. He remembered, instead, the slow blue glow of waking up in the body of a 13-year-old boy in a cathedral filled with white candles, his hand burning where the glyph of his class was just beginning to form. Olive skin warm with candlelight. Dark hair falling into eyes that were already a strange, dark gold. The eyes the gossip pages had loved to call the foundling prince's only pretty inheritance. His new name was Roan Pendrast. He was the adopted son of King Aldric Pendrast IV of Eldermark. And the world he had been born into was a world whose bones he had spent 11 years memorizing. The glyph finished forming. The bishop of the choosing, who had been smiling indulgently a moment before, stopped smiling. Then he looked at the king, who was watching from the dais with the careful, level gaze of a man who had been a soldier before he had been a sovereign. The bishop's mouth formed a word he could not bring himself to speak. Roan looked down at his own hand and read it aloud, because he had wanted to be the first to say it. Reliquary. Subclass, hollow vessel. The cathedral's silence was the silence of 1,000 people pretending not to hear. Behind him, his younger brother Prince Cedric, 9 years old, golden-haired, already wearing the small ceremonial sword the heir, was permitted from his 9th name day. Pushed forward through the crowd of nobles, and grabbed Roan's hand with the indignant possessiveness of a small boy who had decided the world had wronged his older brother. "It's a good one," Cedric announced to the silent cathedral, glaring at the bishop. "I can tell. It sounds important." Roan had laughed for the first time in his new life. He had laughed until tears ran down his face, and the court mistook his laughter for grief, and his little brother held his hand tighter. He almost wept. He had 10 years to prepare. 10 years later, on a road that climbed out of the eastern duchies and turned toward the white spires of the capital, a young man in a dust-gray traveling coat was singing under his breath to a horse that hated him. The horse was an opinionated chestnut mare named Marjorie, on loan from a free company that had thrown him out of their winter camp 3 weeks earlier for the crime of being too quiet at cards. The song was an old Eldermark hymn to the dawn. The young man was Prince Roan Pendrast, 23 years old, dark-haired, olive-skinned, sun-darkened almost to bronze along the line of his jaw, and he had not seen the capital in 4 years. His reliquary glyph itched under the cuff of his glove. It had been itching for 2 weeks now. The closer he came to the cathedral, the more it sang. "You're nervous," he told Marjorie. Marjorie, who was not nervous, snapped at his knee. He laughed. It was a quiet laugh, the laugh of a man who had spent a long time laughing alone. The road bent. The spires came into view through the morning haze, 7 of them, white as bone. The cathedral at their center and the royal palace beside it, the 2 buildings braided together by a colonnade older than the kingdom. He stopped Marjorie on the rise to look. For years ago he had ridden out of those gates on a smaller, Kinder horse with 3 things in his saddlebags. A half-finished spear his father had ordered the royal smith to make for him out of pity, a list written in his own hand of every lesser relic in the 7 kingdoms, and a letter from his brother begging him to come home before midwinter. He had not come home before midwinter. He had spent the 4 years gathering. In his saddlebags now there were 41 lesser relics, 3 greater relics, the calcified heart of a vault WM taken from a barrow he had unsealed alone, a sealed jar of soil from the burnt orchard of a saint, the bones of an unnamed god's left hand wrapped in red silk, and a letter from his brother, much folded, asking him please to be home before Cedric's 20th name day, because the kingdom was changing and his brother needed his counsel, and also because there was going to be cake. The spear was no longer half finished. Roan reached behind his shoulder and touched it through the wrapping of oiled leather. The shaft hummed against his glove. The reliquary head at its top, a crystal cup the size of his fist, set into a flange of silver that bloomed like the petals of a closed lily, was warm even through the wrapping. 7 of the 13 cell slots along the shaft were filled. The 8th was empty and waiting. He had bought a relic for it in a border village 2 days back, from an old man who had not known what he was selling, and the bargaining had been the cruelest hour of Roan's life. He had paid the old man 4 times what he had asked. The old man had wept. Roan had not. He nudged Marjorie forward. The spires grew. The road widened. A King's Road patrol passed him going the other way without recognizing him. He had a country accent now, and 4 years of road dust, and the kind of face that learned not to be remembered, and that was the first sign that he had become what he had set out to become. He had not come back to be a prince. He had come back because his little brother was in danger and did not know it, and because 3 of the people in the inner court of Eldermark were not who they pretended to be, and because there was a wrong thing growing in the foundations of the cathedral, and because none of the people who could have stopped it had the eyes to see it. He had come back because he was the only reliquary in the world. Prince Cedric Pendrast was 19 years old, golden-haired in a way that the court ballads no longer felt the need to mention because it had become a fact of the kingdom, and he was, at the precise moment his brother rode through the western gate of the capital, in the middle of losing a sparring match to his weapons master on purpose. He was not sure why he was losing on purpose. The weapons master had grown old this year, and Cedric did not want to be the one to remind him. He took the blunted sword to his ribs, exhaled the obligatory grunt, and went down to one knee in the sand with as much grace as he could manage. "You're slow today, Your Highness," the weapons master said, panting. "I am slow every day, Master Halden." "Lies." "Half-lies," Cedric corrected, grinning. "Get me water." It was while a page was running for the water that Cedric heard a particular hush sweep across the practice yard. The hush of well-dressed people who had just realized they did not know what to do with their faces. He turned. A young man was standing at the edge of the yard, dressed for the road, dust on his boots and a wrapped spear across his back. He had not bothered to hand his coat to a steward. He had not bothered to remove his glove. He was watching the practice ring with the slight, half-amused tilt of head Cedric had not seen in 4 years. Cedric forgot to breathe. Then he forgot to be the heir to Eldermark. He dropped his blunted sword in the sand and ran across the yard like he was 9 years old, and his brother caught him with one arm and laughed into his hair, and the courtiers who had been waiting to be scandalized had to settle for being merely surprised. "You're late," Cedric said into his brother's coat. "I'm a day early." "You're 4 years late." "That too. Father is going to kill you." "Father is going to be polite and complicated about it." "You are going to kill me." "I am going to kill you," Cedric agreed, and pulled back enough to look at him properly. For years had narrowed Roan's face. The court had always called him the Brown Prince, the Foundling Prince, the Plain Prince, with the dishonest courtesy of people who knew exactly how handsome a man was and resented having to look at him. For years on the road had not dimmed it. It had hardened it. He looked, Cedric realized with a small, sharp twist of brotherly fondness, like a man who had walked through every wrong country and come out on the other side. His eyes, dark gold, almost amber in the morning light, were the same eyes that had watched him at his choosing 6 years ago, the only eyes in the cathedral that had looked at the Aurora Templar glyph on his hand and not looked relieved. "Did you bring me anything?" Cedric demanded. "Yes." "Show me." Rowan pulled a small leather pouch out of his coat, opened it, and tipped a single object into Cedric's palm, a flat, smooth disk of pale stone the size of a coin, etched with a sigil neither of them recognized. It was cold. Then, as it warmed against Cedric's skin, the sigil rearranged itself into the crest of House Pendergast. Cedric stared at it. "It's a tongue stone," Rowan said quietly, "from a temple in the marshlands. It mirrors the heraldry of whoever holds it. If anyone speaks against your house in your presence, it goes black." "How black?" "Black enough that you'll know who in your council is loyal." Cedric closed his fingers around it. He understood, in the way only younger brothers fully understand, that his brother had not come home for the cake. He understood, also, that his brother was not going to tell him everything at once. "How many of these things do you have?" he said. 41 of the small ones. 41. 3 of the big ones. Father is definitely going to kill you. Father knew where I was every season." That made Cedric's eyebrows go up. He thought about it for a moment. Of course he did. He's a king before he's a man. He's our father before he's a king. He's both, Rowan said. He's both at the same time, all the time. He's better at it than he gives himself credit for. He clapped his brother once on the shoulder. "Where is he?" "In the long gallery, reading the day's letters. Pretending he doesn't know you're already in the city." "How do you know he knows?" "Because the Western Gate Guard captain is one of his old company, and he doesn't let a stranger through without a runner." Rowan smiled, the slow, slightly tired smile of a man who had been outmaneuvered by his own father and was glad of it. "Walk with me," he said. King Aldric Pendergast IV of Eldermark was 61 years old, a widower of 19 years, a soldier turned to a statesman with the bad grace of a man who had not asked for the transition. He had buried a wife, raised 2 sons, lost a third before he could be born, and held a kingdom together through a decade of rift-breach skirmishes by virtue of being too stubborn to admit how tired he was. He was reading a letter from the Duchess of Vance, the 3rd such letter this month, and like the others it was about her niece's upcoming presentation at court, and like the others it left a small, unpleasant taste at the back of his throat that he had not yet decided what to do with, when his 2 sons walked into the long gallery without being announced. He set the letter down. He did not stand. He looked at Rowan for a long moment, the way he had looked at him the day they had carried the foundling basket up the cathedral steps and into his arms, measuring, weighing, accepting. "You are filthy," he said. "I am, father. You smell of horse." "I do. You did not write for 8 months. I'm sorry. Did you find what you were looking for?" Rowan pulled his glove off and held his hand out, palm down. The reliquary glyph on the back of it was no longer the empty circle it had been at his choosing. It was full. It was a wheel of 7 petals, 3 burning red, for burning blue, set inside a band of script no one in the kingdom but Rowan could read. The king looked at it for a long time. Then he stood, walked across the gallery, and pulled his older son into a hug that smelled of pipe smoke and old leather. He held him for the count of 7. He let him go. "You have a great deal to tell me," he said. "I have a great deal to tell you. Will it frighten me?" "Yes, father." "Will it ruin Cedric's name day?" "No, father. I would not have come back before his name day if it would." "Then sit down. Cedric, ring for the cold lunch. Rowan, your spear stays in the corner where I can see it. I do not know if I trust it not to absorb me." Rowan laughed and unslung the wrapped spear from his back and stood it carefully against the wall by the window. The crystal head, even through its leather wrapping, threw a small, soft point of amber light onto the marble floor. The king watched it for 1 beat longer than he needed to. "That thing has a name now, doesn't it?" "Vesper Spire," Rowan said. It named itself. Of course it did. What did Tannic of the South Kingdoms used to say? A weapon's name is its first prayer to its bearer. Sit down. Eat. Tell me what is wrong with my kingdom. It went black at the welcome dinner 3 nights later. The dinner was a moderately sized affair by the standards of the Pendrast court, 60 guests, for courses, the heir's coming-of-age tournament scheduled for the following week, a brace of foreign envoys eating as carefully as foreign envoys always do. Roan sat at his father's right because the court would have noticed if he did not, and Cedric sat at his father's left because that was the law of inheritance, and the seat to Roan's own right was occupied by a young woman whose name was on the place card as Lady Mireille Vance. She was 32 years old according to the court register. She did not look 32. She looked 25, and pale, and pleasantly mischievous, and her eyes were the color of a frozen lake at the hour the sun comes up. She had been a fixture of the inner court for 6 years. She was the niece of the Duchess of Vance, who had been writing the king letters about her for at least 6 months. Her class was registered as Lore Master, Subclass, Echo Reader, a scholarly, harmless class, the sort that earned its bearer a chair in the Royal Archive and a stipend. Roan had been waiting for her his entire ride home. She turned to him over the first course with the kind of smile that women had been turning on him at court since he had been 15 years old. It would have worked on most men. It worked on him, in the sense that his face responded in the way court faces are trained to respond. The slight smile, the slight lowering of the lashes, the slight pleasant warmth. "Your Highness," she said, "it's a delight. My lady, is it true you walked the marshlands alone?" "Walked is generous. I rode through the marshlands as quickly as a bad horse would carry me. And you survived. You must tell me how." "By staying very polite to the marsh." She laughed. It was a good laugh. It was a laugh that had been practiced in mirrors, and Roan, who had spent 4 years among people who did not practice their laughs, recognized it the way a hunter recognizes a snare. In Cedric's pocket, the tungstone went cold. Then, slowly, beneath the linen of his trouser pocket, it went black. Cedric, who had been laughing at something his father had just said, stopped laughing. He did not look at Roan. He did not look at the king. He looked at his own wine glass and turned it in his fingers and set it down again with the kind of deliberate care that, between brothers who had grown up in the same house, was a scream. Roan finished his fish course. He had no expression at all. "My lady," he said pleasantly, "tell me about the archives. I have been away too long." She talked about the archives for the rest of the course. He listened with apparent interest. The tungstone in Cedric's pocket stayed black. When they rose from the table at the end of the evening, Roan took his brother's elbow on the way out of the hall and steered him through a side door into the king's private corridor. The king was already there. None of them spoke until the door closed. "Show me," the king said. Cedric pulled the tungstone out of his pocket. It was black as obsidian. As they watched, it slowly began to lighten back toward gray. "It mirrored," Roan said quietly. She was speaking against the house the whole time. Every word was a knife, but the knife was wrapped in flowers. The king looked at him. "You knew?" "I suspected." The stone confirmed. "You suspected before you came home?" "Yes." "That is what brought you home." "In part." The king sat down on the upholstered bench against the corridor wall. He looked, briefly, every one of his 61 years. "Tell me what she is." Roan looked at his brother. Cedric was 19 years old and the heir to the kingdom and one of the most powerful Aurora Templars in 3 generations. He could stand for it. Roan had decided on the road home that he would stop sparing him. "Her class is not Lore Master," Roan said. "Her class is Soulbinder. Her subclass is Crown of Echoes. She steals voices. She wears identities. The Lady Mireille Vance who appeared at this court 6 years ago is not the Lady Mireille Vance who left her aunt's house in the Southern Duchy 10 years ago. The girl who left her aunt's house 10 years ago is dead. She has been dead for 10 years. The woman wearing her face has been moving from court to court for at least 60. The king did not move. Cedric did not move. 60, the king said. At least. How do you know this? Because there is a temple in the marshlands that keeps a list of every crown of echoes that has ever drawn breath. And there have been 13 of them in recorded history, and the most recent of them disappeared in the southern duchies 62 years ago after burning a priest alive. The priest's name was Tannic Vance, the duchess's grandfather. A long silence. And what does she want? She wants the same thing the other two of them want. The three of them are working together. They have been working together for, I would guess, for years. They want the cathedral. What in the cathedral? The thing in the foundations. The king's eyes narrowed. There is no thing in the foundations. There is, Roan said. There has been since the kingdom was founded. The cathedral was built on top of it to seal it. The bishopric has known for 600 years. They forgot what they were guarding 3 centuries ago. They are still guarding it. They just don't remember why. Roan, the king said, if you tell me, on top of everything else, that you have been inside the foundations of the cathedral. Once, 2 years ago, I was very careful. I did not take anything. I only counted the seals. How many seals? 7. 3 are broken. 2 are cracked. 2 are intact. Another silence. You should have told me, the king said. I am telling you now. You should have told me 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I could not have proven it to you. And I would have spent 4 years here being polite while she undid you. I needed time, father. I needed the road. The king looked at his son. The court would have called it a hard look. Cedric, who knew his father, called it the look of a man trying not to weep. All right, he said finally. All right. You will tell me everything. Tonight. Tonight. And tomorrow morning we will smile at Lady Mireille over breakfast as if nothing has changed. As if nothing has changed. And next week, the king said, your brother's tournament will go on as planned, because if we cancel it she will know we know, and she will move before we are ready. Yes, father. And after the tournament, Roan said, I will leave the city for one more journey, and when I come back I will have what I need to finish her. And the other two. The king closed his eyes. Cedric, he said, do you understand what is happening? I understand enough, Cedric said. His voice was steady. He had been the heir his whole life. He was good at his voice being steady. I understand that my brother came home because he loves us, and that I am going to listen to him, and that I am going to win my tournament without dropping any sword on purpose this time, and that I am going to do whatever he tells me to do until this is over. Roan looked at him. Cedric, what? You drop a sword on purpose one more time, and I am going to put you through a wall. You and what army? Me and the vault Wyrem whose heart is in my saddlebag. Cedric snorted. The king laughed despite himself. The kind of helpless, tired laugh that was the closest thing to weeping a king was permitted. Inside, he said, both of you. Now, tell me everything. The week before the tournament, the court rediscovered that the foundling prince had come home. It rediscovered it the way courts rediscover anything they would prefer not to know, slowly, by stages, with much pretending. On the first day, Roan attended his father's morning council in a clean coat and said almost nothing, and the council members commented to one another afterward that the foundling prince had developed a presence, by which they meant they had not been comfortable when he had looked at them. On the second day, he sparred in the practice yard with his brother for the first time in 4 years, and the practice yard slowly filled with courtiers who had remembered urgent business near the practice yard. On the third day, the betting books in the lower city were opened on the tournament, and 3 different cities sent runners up from the harbor to ask whether the rumor that the foundling prince intended to enter the tournament was true. It was not true. Roan had no intention of entering Cedric's tournament. His brother had spent his life preparing for it. Roan had spent his life preparing for something else. But the bookmakers did not know this, and even if they had they would not have cared, because the value of Prince Roan Pendrast on a betting line was not in whether he intended to win, but in whether his appearance would change the line on someone else. On the 4th day, the betting line on Lord Vale Dracarin shortened. Lord Vale Dracarin was the fourth richest man in the Seven Kingdoms, the head of the Dracarin family in the southern reaches, and the only man in living memory to have bonded a greater Wyram, a black, six-horned, war-trained dragon called Mogrek that he flew above his estates the way other lords flew banners. He was 41 years old. He was unmarried. He was a Drake Rider, Subclass WRM Tyrant, the rarest tank line subclass in the kingdom and the only living example of it. He had won the previous Heirs tournament 11 years ago, when Cedric had still been a child. He had not entered this one until the morning after Roan had come home. He had entered it, the gossip pages said, to honor the heir. He had entered it. Roan explained privately to his brother in the practice yard on the fourth evening, because his second co-conspirator was already inside the city walls and now wanted to put hands on him. Hands on me. He's going to challenge you in the tournament, Roan said. He's going to fight you in the final round. He's going to push you to the edge of what your subclass can do. He's going to draw out the limits of your aura. He's going to see how much worm fire it would take to kill you, in case the day comes when he needs to know. Charming. Hands on me is the kind way to put it. Why doesn't he just kill me now in the city? Because there is a city watch, and your father is a war king, and your brother is a reliquary, and even Vale cannot afford to start the fight here. So instead he is going to fight me in a tournament where I am favored to win. You are favored to win because your father is the king. You are not favored to win against him. Cedric exhaled slowly. How badly will he beat me? He will not beat you. You will win. I will win. You will win because I am going to be in the audience. Cedric stopped rewrapping his sparring grips. You are going to do something to him from the audience. I am going to do nothing to him from the audience. I am going to be present. The presence of a reliquary of my make in proximity to a WRM tyrant's bond channel will create a small turbulence in his aura. It will not be enough for him to notice. It will be enough for you to win the fourth exchange by 1/4 of a second. How small? Small enough that he will believe he lost because he was overconfident. And if he does notice, then we will know what he can sense, and that is also useful. Cedric, listen to me. You are going to win. You are going to win cleanly. I am only going to put my thumb on the scale enough that clean is what honest looks like, because you are good enough that on a fair field you would win this match 3 times out of 4. And we are only making sure you win it the 1 time out of 4 that matters. That is a beautiful sentence. I've been working on it for 4 years. Cedric laughed. He kept laughing. He laughed in the way he had laughed when he was 9 years old in the cathedral, when his brother had been the only person in the world whose hand he had wanted to hold. Roan. Yes. I missed you. I missed you too. Don't go away again. Roan did not answer that one for a long time. He was watching the western edge of the practice yard, where Lady Mireille Vance had just appeared on the upper gallery in a cream and gray gown and was watching them with the slight, mischievous, practiced smile she had worn at dinner the first night. I will go away one more time, he said, after the tournament, for maybe 3 months. I am going to gather one last thing. What thing? A relic in the northern ice. What relic? The one that finishes my class. What does it do? Roan pulled his glove off and turned his hand so his brother could see the 7-petaled wheel. 3 burning red. For burning blue. It opens the 8th petal, he said. It is the only greater relic I have not been able to find a substitute for. It is in a sealed shrine in a mountain that has been counted as impassable for 900 years. The mountain is impassable to people who do not know which way the door opens. I know which way the door opens. I have known since I was 13 years old. I have been waiting until I was strong enough to stand in front of it. And when the 8th petal opens, then I can fight all 3 of them in the same room. Roan. Yes. You are scaring me a little. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. Be the scary one. I will be the kind one. That is how it has always been with us. Roan looked at him. He had not realized, until this moment, that his 9-year-old brother had said almost exactly that sentence at his choosing, with his hand over Roan's hand, and that Roan had been carrying it around like a relic of his own for 10 years. That is how it has always been with us, he agreed. Above them on the gallery, Lady Mireille Vance smiled, and turned, and was gone. The royal tournament field on the morning of the heir's name day was a field of bright cloth and bright steel. Pavilions in the colors of every duchy in the kingdom ringed the long oval. The bookmakers' tents at the eastern end had a line 1/4 of a mile long. The lower city had emptied itself onto the slopes above the field. The foreign envoys sat on the southern tier in their travel finery, drinking too warm wine and pretending not to count the foot soldiers in the royal honor guard. The king sat under the northern canopy in a coat that had been new at his own coronation. Roan sat beside him in a coat the color of dried blood and a glove on his left hand, which he had not removed in 3 days. His vesper spire stood unwrapped against a pillar behind his chair, in plain view. There had been a small political crisis over whether to permit it. The king had cut the crisis short by ordering it brought. It had not occurred to anyone but Roan that the simple act of standing the spear behind him in the royal canopy might count as a placement on the field. The early bouts were what early bouts always were. A scattering of young second sons trying to earn the attention of marriage brokers. A pair of foreign knights from the Severan courts looking for ransom. A Northland berserker who had ridden 11 days down from the cold coasts on the rumor that the southern wine was worth the trip. Cedric did not have to do anything in the early bouts because the heir's tournament was structured so the heir entered only in the final 8. He sat at his father's left and clapped politely and ate a great deal of bread and watched the field with the careful, focused attention of a man who was not thinking about the field at all, but about who was sitting in which pavilion. In the western pavilion, Lord Vale Dracarin sat in a coat of black and ember red and watched the bouts the way a wolf watches sheep, neither cruelly nor with appetite, merely with the patient evaluation of a thing that ate sheep professionally. His WR Mogrek was not on the field. Mogrek was 3 miles outside the city, chained to a stake of cold iron by Vale's own honor as a guest. The chain was symbolic. The honor was not. In the southern pavilion, Lady Mireille Vance sat beside her aunt the Duchess and wore a hat that hid half her face. In the king's own canopy, 3 seats down from Roan, sat a man whose name on the program was Lord Aurelian of the Hollow Reach. He was a minor lord from the far southern marches whose title had been confirmed by the king's chancellor only 3 years ago, on the recommendation of the southern bishops, after the death of a previous holder. He had a thin gray face, a quiet voice, and eyes the color of pewter. He had introduced himself to Roan on the morning of the first day with a small, polite bow and the words, "I have been wishing to meet you for some time, Your Highness." He had a glove on his left hand. Roan had not slept the night after meeting him. He had not slept because he had recognized the glove. He had recognized it because he had been wearing the same glove for 3 days. Aurelian of the Hollow Reach was a reliquary. That was impossible. There was only one reliquary in the world. That was the entire point of the class. The world was locked to one. The lock was what made the class what it was. If there were 2, then either the lock had been broken, which would mean the world itself was in deeper trouble than Roan had thought, or the lock had been carried over from a previous cycle, which would mean Aurelian had been a reliquary in the last age and had not died, which would mean Aurelian was at least 300 years old, which would mean Aurelian was the third of the 3. Roan had spent 3 months in the marshlands trying to find a record of the previous reliquary. The records had said only that there had been one, that he had served as the high almoner of a kingdom that no longer existed, and that he had vanished at the end of his reign without leaving a body to bury. Roan had assumed the records were incomplete. He had not assumed the previous reliquary was alive. He had not assumed the previous reliquary was the 3rd co-conspirator. He had not assumed the previous reliquary was sitting 3 seats down from him in his father's royal canopy, watching the bouts with eyes the color of pewter and a glove on his left hand and a small, polite, knowing smile. He had been wrong about that. He could be wrong about other things. He had spent the night thinking about all of them. The bouts proceeded. The afternoon wore on. The final 8 became the final 4. Cedric entered the field for the first time in the 3rd round. In a coat of Pindrast blue and white, his hair sun gold, his Aurora Templar glyph blazing soft yellow on the back of his hand. The crowd lost what little composure it had retained. Cedric saluted the king's canopy with the formal half-bow of the air, and then, purely for his own pleasure, he turned and grinned at his brother before he stepped onto the sand. His first opponent lasted a minute and a half. His second opponent, a Sunblade knight from the Western Marches, a man twice his age and a head taller, lasted 4 minutes. And when he went down laughing because his great-grandfather had fought a Pindrast in this same tournament and lost too, and the family had been collecting stories of it ever since. That brought Cedric to the semi-final. The semi-final was the bout Roan had been waiting for. Cedric's semi-final opponent was the Northland berserker from the Cold Coasts, a competent, honest, frightening man named Holic Snowmouth, with a class he had earned at a temple no one in the Southern Kingdoms had heard of. Cedric was favored. Cedric was correctly favored. Cedric won in 12 minutes by a clean disarm, and the crowd roared so loud that the bookmakers' tents at the eastern end of the field stopped taking bets for the count of a minute. And in the other semi-final, Lord Vale Dracarin killed his opponent. He did not mean to. The killing was permissible under the tournament rules. Death was a possible outcome, signaled by the white flag, paid for by the survivor's house, mourned by the king. It happened on average once in a tournament. It had happened on average once in a tournament for 300 years. There was a temple offering for it. The temple offering had a hymn. The killing was permissible. The killing was clean. The opponent had been a competent journeyman knight from one of the southern duchies who had agreed to step in only because the regular 4th seed had broken his leg in the early bouts. Vale cut him down in 3 exchanges. The 3rd exchange opened the man's throat above the collar of his armor. The white flag went up. The temple offering was made. The hymn was sung. But Roan, watching from the canopy with his glove on his left hand and his vesper spire behind him, saw the small, sharp moment between the 2nd and 3rd exchanges in which Vale had decided to kill the man instead of disarming him. He had decided in order to be seen deciding. He had decided because the heir was watching from across the field. He had decided because the message he wanted to send to the Prince of Eldermark before they met on the sand was, "I am willing to kill you." Cedric had seen it too. Cedric was 19 years old and had grown up in a court and was not a fool. He sat at his father's left and clapped politely with the rest of the crowd and ate no more bread for the rest of the afternoon. The king did not move at all. The final was set for the next morning. That night, Roan did not sleep again. He spent the night sitting on the floor of his old childhood bedroom. They had not changed a thing in 4 years. The wooden sword from his 9th name day was still in the corner, with Vesper Spire across his knees and the 7 filled cells of the shaft glowing faintly, 1 petal at a time. He had spent the 4 years on the road learning to listen to them. The first cell, the Marshland Tungstone's twin, hummed faintly when there was a lie being told within 50 paces. The second cell, a knucklebone of a saint of doors, hummed when someone was watching the room. The third cell, the heart fragment of the vault WIRAM he had killed alone in a barrow, never hummed. It was a battery, and it stored the work the others did until he needed to spend it. The second cell hummed all night. He set it on his desk in the morning, walked down to the practice yard, and went to find his brother. "Listen to me," Roan said. Cedric, who had not slept either, listened. "You are going to fight him cleanly," Roan said. "You are not going to try to kill him. You are not going to play to the crowd. You are going to fight the bout you have trained your entire life to fight. You are going to keep your guard. You are going to wait for the 4th exchange. You are going to take it when it comes. And the thumb on the scale will be there. How will I know? You will feel a small cold at the base of your throat at the start of the 4th exchange. It will feel as if someone has opened a window at your back. That is the moment. That is the quarter second. You take the quarter second. And if it doesn't come, it will come. And if he kills me before the 4th exchange." Roan did not answer. He reached into his coat and took out a flat silver disc on a chain. The 8th relic, the one he had bought from the old man in the border village, the one he had been saving for the 8th petal, and he hung it around his brother's neck under his collar. "Don't lose this," he said. "What is it?" "A heart charm of a saint of mercy. It will not stop a killing blow. It will slow one by a half-second. That is enough for you to get out of its way if you are looking for it." "Roan." "Yes. You were going to use that for the 8th petal. I have a better use for it today. I will find another." "You said." "I said it was the only one I had not found a substitute for." "I lied. I have a substitute. The substitute is harder to find, that is all. I have 3 months to find it. You have 10 minutes to win your fight." "Where the charm?" Cedric tucked it under his collar without another word. He stepped onto the sand of the tournament field at the 11th bell of the morning in a coat of Pindrast blue and white, his Aurora Templar glyph blazing soft yellow, his hair gold under the sun. Across from him, Lord Vale Dracarin stepped onto the sand in a coat of black and ember red with a thin smile. The crowd, which had been roaring, fell into the precise hush that a tournament crowd falls into only when it senses, however dimly, that the bout in front of it matters more than a bout should. The king made the formal opening with his voice steady. The 2 combatants saluted. The bell rang. The first exchange was Vale testing. The second exchange was Cedric answering. The third exchange was Vale discovering that the answer was better than he had assumed it would be, and the third exchange was therefore not a test, but a real exchange. And the third exchange ended with Cedric taking a long cut along his forearm that drew a line of blood through the blue and white of his coat. The crowd inhaled. The fourth exchange began. At the base of Cedric's throat, under the silver charm of the Saint of Mercy, he felt the small, cold opening of a window. Across the field, in the royal canopy, Roan had not moved. He had not raised his hand. He had not lifted his eyes. The 7 filled cells of the Vesper Spire behind him were not glowing. To any watcher, including Vale, including Aurelian 3 seats down with his glove on his left hand, Roan Pendrast was sitting in a coat the color of dried blood, watching his brother fight, doing nothing. He was not doing nothing. He was holding the 3rd cell of his spear, the heart fragment of the vault WYRM, open by exactly the width of a needle. He had spent 2 years learning to do this. He had practiced it on river stones. He had practiced it on a single candle flame. He had practiced it, once, on a sleeping bear without waking the bear. The 3rd cell was the battery. The 3rd cell did nothing on its own. The 3rd cell, held open by the width of a needle, was simply available. And every Drakerider's bond channel, every WRM tyrant's especially, drew its power from the same plane that the 3rd cell was now, very faintly, slightly thirsty about. It was the smallest theft. It was so small Vale could not have named it. It was the difference between drawing a full breath and drawing a breath that was 9/10 full. It was the difference between a sword that swung at the speed of conscious thought and a sword that swung at the speed of conscious thought minus 1/4 of a second. The 4th exchange lasted 1¼ seconds. In the 1st second, Vale Dracarin opened with a downward cut intended to take Cedric in the shoulder of his sword arm. In the next quarter second, Cedric did not block the cut. He stepped into it, slipped past it on the inside, and put the flat of his blade against the side of Vale's helmet hard enough to ring the helmet like a bell. Vale staggered. His footing went. His sword arm went down for balance instead of guard. In the final quarter second, Cedric's blade was at his throat. The crowd did not realize the bout was over for nearly 2 full seconds. When it did, it stood. The roar that came out of it was the roar of a kingdom realizing that its heir had won, cleanly, on the sand, by his own hand, against the most dangerous man in the southern reaches. Lord Vale Dracarin lowered his sword. He bowed. He smiled, a thin, ugly smile that the crowd did not catch because it was busy roaring, and he stepped back, and he saluted the king. In the royal canopy, Roan closed the 3rd cell of his Vesper Spire with a small, dry breath. The king did not move. Cedric saluted his father. He saluted the crowd. He turned and saluted his brother. He grinned, and the grin was the grin of a 9-year-old boy holding his older brother's hand in a cathedral, and Roan, who had not allowed himself to smile in 3 days, smiled back. Across the field, in the southern pavilion, Lady Mireille Vance was no longer sitting in her seat. 3 chairs down from Roan, in the royal canopy, Lord Aurelian of the Hollow Reach turned his thin gray face toward him and inclined his head a 1/4 inch. He had felt it. He had felt the 3rd cell open by the width of a needle. He had felt it from 40 feet away, sitting under the same canopy, and he had recognized it for what it was, and he had let Roan know that he had recognized it. And he was not going to do anything about it today, because today was not the day, and his smile was the smile of a man who had already decided what day it would be. Roan inclined his head a 1/4 inch in return. The tournament was over. The war had begun. The king's map room was a circular stone chamber in the lowest level of the palace, 3 doors down from the wine cellar, walled in slate, lit by a ring of oil lamps that smelled faintly of pine resin. The room was older than the palace above it. The map painted on its floor was 9 centuries old and showed a continent that had stopped existing 5 centuries ago. Aldrich Pendrass III had begun the practice of holding his most private councils there because no one alive remembered which corridor it was reached by, which meant no one alive could be loitering outside it without being noticed. The night after the tournament, 4 people stood in the map room. The king, Cedric, in a clean coat, his sword arm bandaged. Roan, gloveless for the first time in days. And a 4th man, Master Halden, the weapons master, 68 years old, whose name was on no court list and whose loyalty was on no court ledger because both had been settled 40 years ago in a soldier's tent on the Seven Rivers campaign and had never since been in doubt. The 4th chair in the room was empty, and was kept empty because the king's most private councils had been 4-chair councils since his wife had died, and he had not yet been able to bring himself to remove the 4th chair. "Tell us," the king said. Roan put both hands flat on the map. He spoke for an hour. He did not raise his voice. He spoke first of Lady Mireille, what she was, what she had done, how many bodies she had walked through to reach this court. He spoke second of Vale Dracarin, what he was, what he intended to do with Mogrek, why he had killed his semi-final opponent. He spoke third of Aurelian of the Hollow Reach. When he spoke of Aurelian, the king's hands closed slowly on the edge of the map. "Roan, yes, father. You are telling me that I confirmed the title of an immortal. 3 years ago, on the recommendation of the southern bishops, yes." "Which bishop?" "The bishop of Hollow Reach itself, who is dead. He died of natural causes 4 months after writing the letter of recommendation. The bishop who replaced him died 2 months after that. The bishop who replaced him is on the road to the capital now, and she does not believe in Aurelian's title, and she is the 3rd reason I have come home." "Where is she now?" 6 days out, on the western road, accompanied by 10 of her order. They will arrive before midwinter. She is the witness we will need." The king closed his eyes for one breath. "Open them. What does Aurelian want?" "He wants what is in the foundations of the cathedral, the same as the other 2. But where Mireille wants it for its voices and Vale wants it for its fire, Aurelian wants it because he has been a reliquary for 300 years, and the thing in the foundations is the last relic on the continent he has not absorbed. He has been collecting since before the founding of Eldermark. He has gathered the relics of 2 kingdoms that no longer exist. He has gathered, by my count, 11 greater relics. He has the 8th petal of his wheel open. He has the 9th. He has the 10th. He has the 11th. And you have 7. 7 petals. 3 greater relics. 41 lesser. How many petals does he need to open the thing in the foundations? 13. And he has 11. He needs 2 more. He has known for at least 60 years what the 2 are. 1 is in the northern ice, the relic I have been planning to find for the 8th petal. He cannot get it without me, Because the door to the shrine opens only to a reliquary who has not yet opened the 8th petal. The door does not let him through. The door will let me through. He has been waiting for me to come back to the world. He has been waiting, specifically, for me to reach the age I am now. Why this age? Because the 13th petal of a reliquary opens at 25. It is a class quirk. He cannot, until I have opened the 13th petal, draw on me. He has waited 300 years for the next reliquary. He has waited 23 of those for me. He will wait 2 more, if he must. He would prefer not to. And the other relic he needs is in the foundations of the cathedral, which he cannot reach without breaking the seals, which he cannot break without my 8th petal already open, which means his plan is to wait until I open the 8th petal, kill me, take it from my corpse, walk into the cathedral, open the foundations, and use what is in the foundations to open the other 5 petals at once. A very long silence. Master Halden, who had not spoken yet, exhaled. "My king," he said, "why is your son still planning to go north?" "Because," Roan said, before his father could answer, "the relic in the northern ice is also the only relic that lets me fight Aurelian at all. Without the 8th petal, I cannot oppose him. With the 8th petal, I can. The only way to defeat him is to go and get the relic he needs me to get. The only way to defeat him is also the only thing he is allowing me to do. That is a trap. That is a trap. And you intend to walk into it. I intend to walk into it with my eyes open, with the only mount in the kingdom he cannot intercept, with the only weapon he cannot match, and with the gift of his own patience. He has waited 300 years. He will not move on me at the shrine itself. He cannot. The shrine will not let him through the door. He must wait for me to leave it. Between leaving the shrine and reaching the capital, there is a 40-day ride. He will try to take me on that ride. I will not let him. And the other 2. Vale will move on the city while I am gone. He believes the city is undefended once I leave. He is wrong. The city is defended by my brother and my father, and by Master Halden, and by the witness from the southern bishopric, and by the 38 lesser relics I am leaving behind to be planted at the gates and walls and doors of the palace. They will not stop a greater WIRM. They will slow one. They will buy you the days you need. Mireille will try to move on the throne room from inside. She will not succeed. Master Halden has, by my count, 63 quiet men in this city whose loyalty to the king predates my birth. She does not have 63. She has herself, her aunt the Duchess, and 4 mercenaries her aunt has been quietly housing on the southern estate. I have given Master Halden the names of all 4. Master Halden nodded once. "What is the mount?" Cedric said. Roan looked at his brother. "The mount is what I came here to tell you about last," he said. "Father, sit down." The king did not sit down. "What is the mount, Roan?" "The mount," Roan said, "is the reason I lost touch for 8 months. The mount is in a high valley in the eastern spine, 12 days' ride from the city, in a glacial lake that is warmer than it should be for its altitude. She is 12 years old. She is half the size of Mogrek. She has slate-gray scales with bronze edges, and a single straight horn instead of a crown of them. And she has been waiting for me since I was 15 years old. Roan. Her name is Thornwake. Roan. I bonded her 4 months ago, Father. I did not write because the bond was new and the writing would have weakened it. She is the only living member of her line. Her line is older than the Dracaran line by 2 centuries. Her line is what the Dracaran line is descended from, in the way kingdoms are descended from older kingdoms. She is small. She is fast. She is 2 of the 4 reasons Aurelian cannot intercept me on the northern road. The other 2 are Vesperspire and me. The king sat down. He sat for a long moment with his hands flat on his knees. "Cake," he said finally. "You came home for cake. I came home for cake and for the rest of it. And you have a dragon. I have a dragon. Of course you have a dragon. Why would my son not have a dragon? Why would the foundling prince of Eldermark, who at 13 was given the most useless class in the records of the cathedral, not have a dragon at 23? in addition to 41 lesser relics, and a spear that names itself, and a plan to defeat 3 immortal conspirators in his father's throne room. Of course you have a dragon. Cedric, pour me a drink. Cedric, who was already halfway to the sideboard, poured him a drink. The king drank it. He set the cup down. He looked at his older son. When do you leave? At dawn the day after tomorrow. I will be back at the dark of the second moon. 45 days, if the wind is fair. 50 if it is not. I will not be later than 50. And if you are, then Cedric is the king, father. He has been ready since his choosing. He has been more ready than I have been. He is trained for this. I have only been training to make sure he is the king of a kingdom that is still standing. Cedric, who was at the sideboard, put the wine jug down very carefully. The king nodded slowly. All right, all right, all right, the king said again. And the second all right was the word with which kings, in the long tradition of kings, signed the orders they would have preferred not to sign. You will leave at dawn the day after tomorrow. You will go to the eastern spine. You will fly your dragon north. You will open the 8th petal. You will come home. You will be late by no more than 5 days. You will, while you are gone, send me word at every way station. You will, before you go, sit with your brother for one full evening so that he can yell at you for as long as he requires. You will, before that, kneel in front of me here in this room, because you have been gone for 4 years and your old man requires it. Roan knelt. The king put his hand on his head, the long brown hand of a war king on the dark hair of a son who had never carried his blood and had carried his name anyway. And he said the old Pendrast benediction in the old Pendrast tongue, the one the family had stopped saying at coronations a century ago, because it was bad luck. He said it anyway. He needed it. When he was done, he pulled Roan up and held him for the count of 7 and let him go. Go, he said. Come back. I will, father. You will. Cedric yelled at him for 2.5 hours. He yelled at him for going. He yelled at him for not going sooner. He yelled at him for giving him the heart charm of the Saint of Mercy. He yelled at him for nearly bleeding out from a forearm cut he could have parried if he had been honest with himself about how good Vale was. He yelled at him for the 8 months of silence. He yelled at him for the cake, for not arriving in time to taste the cake, for having to be told there had been cake. He yelled at him for the dragon. He yelled at him for the spear. He yelled at him for being the older brother and for going alone. He yelled at him until he ran out of words. And then he sat on the floor of Roan's old childhood bedroom with his back against the bed frame and put his head in his hands. I'm sorry, he said. I am being a child. You are being my younger brother. There is a difference. Roan. Yes. Don't die. I won't. I know I'm the heir. I know I am supposed to be ready. I am ready. I have been ready since I was 12. I would do it. I would do all of it. I would do it well. But I have been the younger brother my whole life, and I do not know how to be the only brother, and I do not want to learn. Roan sat down on the floor beside him. You are not going to learn, he said, because I am going to come back. You can't promise. I can promise. You can't. I can. I have looked. I have looked at every step of this. I have looked at the door of the shrine. I have looked at the road back. I have looked at Aurelian's options on the road. He cannot kill me, Cedric. He can try. He cannot. I am not boasting. I am being precise. I have spent 4 years being precise about exactly this. He can kill me only after I have opened the 8th petal, and I am going to open it inside the shrine, and the shrine is going to close behind me. And by the time I am outside the shrine, he will know that the only chance he has is to take the relic from me before I reach the next greater relic. And the next greater relic is in the city, in the foundations, and to reach it I have only to reach the city. I have only to reach the city. I have to ride 40 days. I have a dragon. You have a dragon. I have a dragon. Cedric laughed wetly into his sleeve. Roan. Yes. Bring her to dinner sometime. Thornwake. Yes. She is not a dinner dragon. What is a dinner dragon? Mogrek is not a dinner dragon either. There is no such thing. Then I will be the first to invent it. I am the heir. I am permitted to invent customs. I will invent the custom of bringing dragons to dinner. We will eat outside. You will introduce her to me properly. I will be on my best behavior. Father will allow it because father will be tired of being king by then. Roan put his head against his brother's shoulder. He had not done that since they were children. Cedric did not move. All right, Roan said. I will bring her to dinner. At midwinter. At midwinter. You will be back by midwinter. I will be back by midwinter. Swear. I swear. They sat against the bed until Cedric fell asleep, leaning against his older brother's shoulder, with the heart charm of the Saint of Mercy still under his collar. Roan carried him to the bed. He pulled the cover up over him. He stood for a minute in the doorway watching him sleep, the way he had stood in cathedrals watching candles. He left at dawn the day after. The eastern spine was a chain of mountains older than the kingdom. It separated the central duchies from the cold coasts. 12 days' ride from the capital, in a valley that was on no map newer than the one painted on the floor of the king's map room. There was a small glacial lake whose water was warmer than its altitude permitted because what lived under it was warm. Roan rode Marjorie the chestnut mare for 10 of the 12 days. He rode his own legs for the final 2. The road in the high valley was not a road. It was a memory of a road. He left Marjorie with a goat herd in the last village before the climb, paid the goat herd a quarter of a year's wages, and went up alone. The valley opened in front of him at the end of the second day on foot. The lake was a perfect circle of gray-blue water, ringed by black stones. Snow on the stones, but not on the water. There were 3 pine trees on the eastern shore. There was no wind. He set the wrapped vesper spire down against one of the pines. He took his gloves off. He whistled, a low, 3-note whistle, the one he had spent his 15th year learning from a dying drake master in the southern marches, the one Aurelian had no record of because the drake master had never written it down and Aurelian had never thought to ask. The lake answered. The answer was a long, low sound from below the water, the sound of a great body shifting in the dark, and then a sudden rush of bubbles from the center of the lake, and then a head broke the surface. She was the size of a draft horse. Her head was the size of his torso. Her scales were slate gray along the spine, bronze along the edges of the wings, the color of old silver under the chin. Her eyes were the color of his eyes. Her single straight horn rose from her brow like the spire of a bell tower in miniature. She had a long whip-like tail that, when she lifted it from the water, had 2 small bronze fins along its last third. She came out of the lake the way a swan comes out of a lake, without effort, without hurry. She shook the water from her wings. She walked across the stones to him on 4 feet, the wings folded along her back, and she set her chin on his shoulder the way a cat sets its chin on a beloved knee, and she sighed. He pressed his forehead against her temple. I'm home, he said. She rumbled. It was a sound he could feel through his collarbone. I have to ask you something. She rumbled. I have to ask you to fly me north. I have to ask you to fly me to the high shrine. I have to ask you to wait outside the door while I go in. I have to ask you to fly me home after, and to fight on the way home if we have to. And I have to ask you to come into a city you have never been to, and to sit through a dinner my brother is planning to throw for you in midwinter, at which you will be the guest of honor, and you will be expected to be polite. Can you do that? She rumbled. I'll take that as yes. She huffed a small puff of warm steam into the side of his neck and walked back into the lake. And he stood on the stones and watched her go under. And then he picked up Vesper Spire and waited. She came up at dawn with the saddle. The saddle had not been on her when she had gone under. The saddle was made of black leather and bronze fittings, old by 100 years, the buckles green with age. The saddle had been waiting at the bottom of the lake for as long as her line had been waiting. He did not ask where it had come from. He had stopped asking that kind of question about her family 3 months ago. He had decided he would find out the answer slowly, over the rest of his life, when she was ready to tell him. He fitted the saddle. He fitted the bridle, which was made of the same black leather but had no bit, because she did not need a bit. He climbed on. She turned her head to look at him. North, he said. She went north. They flew for 19 days. They flew above the clouds when the clouds permitted and below them when the clouds did not. They flew over the foothills of the eastern spine, over the river network of the upper marches, over the long pine forests of the Duchy of Vorn. They flew over a village whose people came out and waved, and a village whose people came out and threw stones, and a village whose people did neither because they were busy hiding. They flew over a rift breach in the foothills west of Vorn, a long black scar in the ground from which monsters bled out at irregular intervals. And Thornwake circled it once and breathed a small thread of fire that was not heat, but was something else. And the rift breach closed by a hand's breadth, and she made a small, satisfied sound, and they flew on. He learned, that day, that her fire was not what dragon fire was supposed to be. Her line was older. Her fire mended as easily as it burned. They slept on cliff sides. They slept in the lee of glaciers. They slept once on the roof of a temple in the northern reaches whose monks had not seen a dragon in 8 generations and who insisted on feeding them both. The dragon a whole roasted boar, and Roan a bowl of barley porridge with honey, and a long, careful interview with the abbess about the foundling prince of Eldermark, whom she had been waiting to meet for 15 years because her predecessor had had a vision about him in his cradle. The vision, the abbess said, had been brief. "What did your predecessor see?" Roan asked. "He saw a man with a spear walking out of a mountain with the 8th petal of his wheel burning blue." Just that. Just that. He said it 3 times. Then he said, "He will not be alone. Will not be alone." That is what he said. Roan thought about it for a long time. He thought about it as he and Thornwake left the temple in the morning, and as they crossed the long white plain that ran up to the foot of the unnamed mountain, and as Thornwake circled the mountain once and found, on its northern face, the narrow ledge that was the only place a dragon her size could land within a day's walk of the shrine door. He thought about it again when, at the edge of the ledge, he looked up and saw, sitting on a stone in the snow with his hands folded in his lap, a man in a gray traveling coat with a glove on his left hand, who had not been there a moment ago. It was not Aurelian. It was a young man, olive-skinned, dark hair, about 23 years old, with dark gold eyes. Roan drew Vesper Spire from his back. The young man on the stone looked up. He smiled. It was Roan's own smile. "Hello," the young man said in Roan's own voice. "I am the one your abbess saw. I have been waiting for you for 13 years. Come and sit down. I have a story to tell you." Thornwake, behind Roan, growled. The growl was a low, deep sound that made the snow tremble on the ledge. The young man's smile did not change. "It's all right," he said. "I am not him. He sent me because he could not come himself. He thought I would be the face you would listen to. He thought wrong. I am not him at all. I am the Reliquary who came before you both. I am the one whose name is not in the records because the records have been edited. I am the one whose will was not opened the way his was opened. I am the one who left the relic in the shrine for you. I am the 8th petal of the wheel, Roan. I am what you become if you finish what you started. I am also what you can refuse to become. Sit down. The shrine will wait. Your dragon will not freeze. Sit down. Let me tell you what is at the bottom of the cathedral. Let me tell you what Aurelian is. Let me tell you who I was. Then go through the door." Roan lowered Vesper Spire. He did not put it away. He set it across his knees. He sat. He listened. The old reliquary's name had been Sevis. He had been born in a kingdom called Arene, which had been the southern half of the continent 800 years ago and was now the bottom of a sea, sunk in a single night by a thing that had escaped its ceiling. He had been a foundling, too, left on the steps of a temple of the dawn, and the temple had raised him, and at his choosing he had received the reliquary class. He had been the first reliquary in 900 years. The temple had not known what to do with him. The temple had decided to let him decide what to do with himself. He had decided, at first, to be useful. He had walked his kingdom for a decade, gathering lesser relics for the temples that no longer had the resources to seek them. He had grown the wheel of his glyph slowly and well. He had opened his 8th petal at 25, exactly on his name day, and his 9th at 31, and his 10th at 40. At 43, he had met Aurelian. Aurelian had been, at that time, a young man, seemingly a young man, who had walked into Sevis's mountain hermitage with a glove on his left hand and a smile that was very nearly Sevis's own. Aurelian had introduced himself as the reliquary of the cycle before. He had explained, gently, that the world lock did not always work the way the lore said. He had explained that a reliquary who completed all 13 petals while still alive at the precise moment of his natural death could choose to become the seal for the next cycle, and thus could persist across the world locks in a kind of stasis, alive but anchored to the relic net of the world. He had explained that he had done this. He had explained that he was thus simultaneously the previous and current reliquary. He had explained that the world lock had cracked under the weight of this, and that the next reliquary, Sevis, had been born anyway, in defiance of the lock, because the world had judged the previous reliquary insufficient. He had explained that he, Aurelian, did not feel insufficient. He had explained that he believed Sevis had been a mistake. He had asked Sevis to die. Sevis had refused. Sevis had been 43 and was not in the habit of dying for the convenience of strangers. He had also been a reliquary with 10 open petals, and the reliquary class is not a class that is easily killed. Aurelian had withdrawn. Aurelian had spent the next 70 years arranging the death of Sevis's kingdom. He had not killed Sevis directly. He had killed his temple. He had killed his patrons. He had bought, one by one, every bishop in the southern bishopric who could be bought, and ruined every bishop who could not. He had whispered in the ear of a young thing in the foundations of the Cathedral of Eldermark, a thing whose name Sevis had spent his life keeping bound, until the young thing had grown old and angry, and had broken its seals from inside, and had risen out of the foundations one night and taken the kingdom of Eldermark under the sea. Sevis had survived. Sevis had been alone on a mountain when it happened. Sevis had not survived for long. He had walked north for 1 year, all the way to this mountain, the unnamed one in front of which they were now sitting, and he had used the relic in the shrine, the one that opened the 8th petal, and he had used it not to open his own 8th petal, but to bind himself into it. He had become the relic. He had set himself there, an instruction in stone, waiting for the next reliquary to come who was not Aurelian. He had been waiting in the shrine for 781 years. The young face he had now was not his own. It was Roan's. He had taken it because he had seen Roan coming. He had wanted Roan to be willing to listen. "You waited for me," Roan said. Specifically, the world lock does not allow more than 2 reliquaries at one time. With Aurelian persistent across cycles, the lock has been jammed at 2 for 800 years. You are the second living reliquary in this cycle. You are the only one Aurelian cannot kill at a distance. You are the only one who can reach this door without him. You are the only one I can speak to. I have known you were coming since you were 10 years old in the Cathedral of Eldermark. I have been riding the door open for you for 13 years. The door is yours. The relic inside the shrine is yours. Take it. Open the 8th petal. Go home. You have not told me the last part. I have not. Tell me. The old reliquary, wearing Roan's face, looked at the snow. When you open the 8th petal, he said quietly, you will inherit my memory. All of it. 800 years of it. The drowning of Eldermark. The faces of the people I could not save. The 163 lesser relics I gathered, and the 14 greater relics I held. You will inherit the names of every reliquary who has ever lived, because I gathered those too. There have been only 9 of us in the recorded history of the world, and Aurelian and I, and you are 3 of them. You will inherit my training. You will inherit my fighting forms. You will inherit my regret. You will, in particular, inherit my regret. There is a great deal of it. I am sorry. I would not give it to you if I had a choice. The 8th petal is the petal of inheritance. It cannot be opened any other way. The relic is not a key. The relic is me. Rome was silent for a long time. Sevis. Yes. What is in the foundations of the Cathedral of Eldermark? The same thing that was in the foundations of the Cathedral of Arene. A young god, a small young god, bound at its naming by the founder of the kingdom, who used it as a foundation stone in the literal sense. They do this in the early kingdoms. They bind small gods to their cornerstones. It is bad practice. It worked for 6 centuries. The seals have weakened. They are weakening now because Aurelian has been picking at them from beneath. He cannot break them himself. That is what he needs the 13th petal for, and the 13th petal is what he needs your 8th petal to reach. But he can prepare them. He has prepared them. The small god in the foundations is awake now. It is angry. It does not yet know who it is angry at. When the last seal cracks, it will rise. Aurelian intends to be there with the open 13th petal when it rises, and to bind it into himself. And what would happen then? Then Aurelian would become a god. A small god. A small god is a god. And the kingdom would die the way Arene died. The continent is not large enough for a small god awake. The cities along the eastern coast would go first, then the central duchies, then Eldermark, then the rest. Aurelian does not believe this will happen. He believes he will contain it. He is wrong. He was wrong about Arene. He has not learned. He cannot learn. He has been alive too long. His ability to learn has been one of the things he has spent. Roan put his face in his hands. Sevis. Yes. Why didn't you stop him? I did. I am stopping him. I am stopping him now. I have spent 800 years preparing to give my memory to a reliquary who is not him. I have prepared you. You will stop him. I will help. I have nothing else to do. Sevis. Yes. I am sorry. You have nothing to apologize for. Go through the door. Take the relic. Open the 8th petal. Come back out. Your dragon will be waiting. The flight home will be hard. I will help. I will be with you. I am sorry about the regret. The regret will not pass. You will learn to carry it. Reliquaries learn to carry things. That is the whole of the class. Go. Roan sat for a while longer. He stood up. He picked up Vesper Spire. He bowed to the old reliquary, wearing his own face. The old reliquary bowed back. He walked across the snow to the shrine door, which was a slab of black stone in the side of the mountain with no visible hinge, and he set the head of Vesper Spire against it, and the door opened inward without sound. He went in. Behind him, on the stone, the old reliquary in Roan's face sat down, folded his hands in his lap, and waited to be inherited. The shrine was a single round chamber the size of a small chapel, walled in black stone, lit by no visible light source, with a single object at its center. The object was a small bone reliquary in the shape of a closed hand. It was the size of a child's fist. It was made of the bone of the inside of a reliquary's own wrist, the small carpal bone above the glyph, taken from Sevis's own arm and shaped by his own hand into a container for himself. Roan approached it. He set Vesper Spire down at the threshold. He knelt. He picked up the reliquary in his bare left hand. The glyph on the back of his hand opened the 7th petal and reached for the 8th. The 8th petal was the empty space he had been carrying for 10 years. The reliquary settled into it, as if into a slot in a lock. It opened the petal. The opening of the 8th petal was not pain. It was not pleasure. It was a long, slow filling, the way an empty cup fills when held under a slow waterfall. He felt, first, weight. Then he felt the slow accumulation of someone else's life. Then he felt the faces. There were a great many of the faces. He had known there would be. He had not known how kind some of them would be. He sat on the floor of the shrine for a long time and let them come, and when they were done he was crying. But he was not sobbing. He was the kind of crying that the very deep grief that is not your own becomes when it is shared. He stood up. His left hand was no longer his left hand. Or it was, but it was also Sevis's. The 8th petal was open, and it was blue, and it was deeper and stranger than any of the other 7, and along the inside edge of it, in script no one in his life was alive to read, was Sevis's name. He bowed to the empty shrine. "Thank you," he said. He walked out. The old reliquary in his own face was no longer on the stone. Thornwake was at the edge of the ledge. She was watching the sky to the south. She was watching the sky to the south because there were 3 dots in it, growing larger, flying fast, and the dot in the middle was very large indeed. It was Mogrek. Roan ran. He hit the saddle at a run. Thornwake was airborne before his feet were fully in the stirrups. The wind hit him like a wall. "He couldn't follow us in," he shouted into Thornwake's neck. He sent his ally instead. Thornwake answered with a roll that flattened him against the saddle. They went north first, away from the dots, because going south meant flying into them. They went north for the count of 200 wing beats, climbing, gaining altitude. The cold was bitter. The thin air burned. He clung to the saddle with one hand and to Vesper Spire with the other. The 8th petal in the spear's head burned bright blue. The 7 older petals burned with it, brighter than they had ever burned. He could feel the spear now. The Vesper Spire was no longer a weapon. It was a chord he was playing. He was a reliquary with an open 8th petal. He had 800 years of training in his hands that had not been there an hour ago. He turned in the saddle. He looked south. He counted the dots. 3. The largest was Mogrek. The smaller 2, far smaller, were the wardrakes that flew with him on his estates. The smaller 2 were trained to harry. Mogrek was trained to kill. Vale was not on Mogrek. Vale could not afford to be on Mogrek. Vale was in the city. Vale was busy in the city. Vale had sent his dragon north on his own order, with a rider who was not Vale, a Drake Rider lieutenant of the Dracaran house, who knew Mogrek but did not own him. This was useful. Roan brought Vesper Spire across his lap and opened the 3rd cell, the heart fragment of the vault WRM, not by the width of a needle this time, but by the width of a finger. The 3rd cell was the battery. He had been using it as a thumb on a scale. He was no longer using it as a thumb. He was using it as a hammer. He turned Thornwake. She turned. They came around in a long arc and bore down on the 3 dots from above. The 2 wardrakes saw him first. They broke formation. They climbed. He let them climb. They were the harrying drakes. They would try to flank Thornwake from above, drive her down toward Mogrek. He had been a Drake Rider scholar for 4 years. He knew the formation. The formation worked against any flyer that could not break out vertically. Thornwake could break out vertically. He let the drakes climb to the position they had been trained to climb to. Then he opened the 3rd cell of Vesper Spire all the way. The vault WRM's heart fragment was the calcified core of a creature that had lived in dark places and eaten light. Opened all the way, it drank from the surrounding ether the way a parched man drank water. The wardrake's wings were sustained by ether. The vault WRM's heart drank theirs at 5 paces. They fell. They did not die. They fell. They beat their wings for purchase against a sky that suddenly had no purchase to offer. They went down 2,000 feet before he closed the cell, and by the time he closed it they were spinning, and by the time they had recovered they were out of the fight, because they could not climb back to the engagement altitude before he was over Mogrek. Mogrek was a different matter. Mogrek was a greater WRM bonded to a WRM tyrant. The bond was a different bond than Thornwake's. Mogrek's bond was the bond of a soldier to a general. Thornwake's bond was the bond of a sister to a sister. Mogrek would not break formation. Mogrek would not flinch. Mogrek's rider would die before Mogrek did, and Mogrek's rider had not come on this flight. Roan did not want to kill Mogrek. Mogrek had not chosen Vale. Mogrek had been bonded to the Dracaran line by inheritance. He opened the 5th cell of Vesper Spire instead. The 5th cell held a fragment of the calming bell of the Temple of the Southern Duchies, a small bronze sliver of a bell that had been rung at the end of 3 centuries of war between the Dracaran line and the Temple, and which had been hidden in a marketplace stall for 6 generations until Roan had walked into the stall on his 16th name day and asked about a bronze teaspoon. The 5th cell sang. Mogrek heard it. Mogrek's flight wavered. Mogrek's rider, a competent man, not a bad man, A Drakerider lieutenant in the gold and black of House Dracarin fought it. Mogrek shook his great horned head. The wavering became a slow circle. The circle became a slow descent. Mogrek would not fly home. Not yet. The bond was too deep for that. But Mogrek would not engage. The lieutenant cursed and beat his fist on the saddle and pulled the bridle hard, and Mogrek did not respond. Mogrek was listening to the bell. Roan flew past them. He flew past them at a distance of perhaps 300 feet, close enough for the lieutenant to see his face, and he raised one hand in a slow, polite salute. The lieutenant did not return it. The lieutenant was busy. Thornwake huffed. He felt her amusement through the saddle. "South," he said. She turned south. The fifth cell sang for an hour after they were over the horizon. Mogrek did not follow. The two harrying wardrakes did not catch them. The road home was open. It was open for 1 day. It was open for 2 days. On the third day, in the air above the marshlands, a single black dot rose from a hill that no map had marked, and the dot resolved itself, as it climbed, into a thing that should not have been able to fly. It was a rift-breach monster. It was a big rift-breach monster. It was something that had been waiting in a hole for 800 years. It had Aurelian's mark on it. The thing had a name. The name was older than Eldermark. Roan knew the name the way he knew everything that had ever lived in the records of the Temple of the Marshlands. Sevis had known it, and now Sevis's knowing was in him. The name was Orthomyrindris, which in the old tongue meant the thing that wears the orchard. In appearance, it was a long-bodied serpent with the leathered gray skin of something that had not seen the sun in centuries. It was perhaps 60 feet long. It had no wings of its own. It was being carried up into the air by a cloud of small, fast, biting things, true rift-breach insects, swarming around it in a dense black halo, lifting it with the weight of their flight. The cloud was so thick the serpent's body was nearly hidden. Its eyes, there were 8 of them, in pairs along the underside of its jaw, were closed. It was sleeping. It was being flown, sleeping, by its own swarm. It would wake when it was over Thornwake. Roan felt the 8th petal of his hand open further. He felt Sevis's instructions settle into his palm. Do not let it wake. Cut the swarm. He opened the 7th cell of Vesper Spire. The 7th cell held a single seed. The seed was the dried, hardened heart of a fruit from the burnt orchard of a saint of summers. The saint who had walked into a fire and turned it to fruit, and whose orchard had then burned and turned to coal and then to seed again, in a single tree that had been growing in the courtyard of a temple in the central duchies for 900 years. Roan had paid 3 years' silence to a temple lay brother to acquire a single seed. The seed was a lesser relic. It was also, when burned, the only thing besides direct sunlight that the swarming things of the marshlands could not stand. He set the seed on the head of Vesper Spire and burned it. He burned it with the 3rd cell, the vault WRM's heart, held open by the width of a finger, drinking the cold air around the seed and turning it into a small, dry, perfect dawn. The seed caught. The seed flared. Vesper Spire became a beacon. The beacon was the color of an apricot at first light. Thornwake banked into the cloud. The swarm screamed. It screamed with 60,000 small voices, each the size of a moth's voice, and the screaming was not a sound but a buffeting against the eardrum. The light from the seed expanded as Vesper Spire passed through the cloud, and the cloud died around it in a long brown rain of bodies. The serpent fell. It fell 60 feet, then 100, then 100 more, and Roan made a small calculation. If it hits the marsh, it lives. If it hits the road, it lives. If it hits the rocks, it dies. And he banked Thornwake hard left and herded the falling body with the light of the seed until it fell on the rocks above the road. It hit. It cracked. It writhed once, the 8 eyes opening for the first and last time in 800 years, and they were the eyes of an old thing that had not consented to its own existence, and Roan felt Sevis's grief in his chest as the eyes closed. "Sleep," he said softly. "Sleep, brother." Thornwake circled the body once. The seed on Vesper Spire's head burned out and crumbled to ash. The seventh cell was empty. He looked south. The marshlands stretched out below them. The road to the capital was a thin gray thread through them. There were no other dots in the sky. Aurelian had spent a thing he had been hoarding for 800 years. Aurelian had spent it on a single attempt to take Roan out of the air. Aurelian had failed. Aurelian, Roan realized with a slow, settled certainty, was not coming for him again on the road. Aurelian was going to be waiting in the city. He patted Thornwake's neck. He set the wrapped Vesper Spire across his lap. He tucked his face down behind her shoulder for warmth, and they flew south, and the seventh cell on the spear's shaft was empty, and the eighth petal on the back of his hand was blue and burning, and inside his mind Sevis was very quiet because Sevis was tired, because Sevis had not been outside the shrine in 781 years, and because the world was very bright. Rest, Roan said into his own mind. I have the rest of it. I will, Sevis said. Wake me when you reach the city. I will. He flew. He had asked for 45 days. He flew the return in 22. 22 days was not enough. He learned how short 22 days had been on the morning he saw the smoke. It was on the third dawn of the third week of his journey home. The marshlands had given way to the foothills to the central duchies, the central duchies to the long descent down the plains road that turned, in its last 50 miles, toward the capital. The capital was visible from 100 miles up at Thornwake's altitude. The capital was always visible. The white spires reflected morning light into the eastern haze and threw a small bright, but on the horizon that one could navigate by. The bright that was not bright that morning. The bright that was muddied. Above the white spires there was a column of brown smoke that had been rising long enough that it had begun to flatten under its own weight. Roan pressed himself flat against Thornwake's neck. Fly, he said. She flew. She flew for an hour without resting. The wind was at her back. The capital came up out of the haze faster than he had ever seen it. The smoke clarified itself as he approached. It was not the city. The city was not burning. The smoke was rising from one specific quarter of the city, the southern quarter, the noble quarter, the quarter where the king's old guard lived in their townhouses around the practice yard of the palace. Master Halden's house was in that quarter. The smoke was rising from that house. Roan banked Thornwake hard. He brought her low. He came into the city not from the north, the formal arrival approach for a returning prince, but from the east, low over the river, hidden by the river's morning mist, fast and quiet. He sat down in the palace's inner garden, where his father's old hawk mews had stood empty for 30 years. The hawk mews had been built large because the old king's preferred hawks had been enormous. The hawk mews was almost exactly the size of a medium dragon. He slid out of the saddle. Stay, he said. I'll come back. There may be people. Don't burn them unless I say. Thornwake huffed. He ran. He ran through the inner garden, through the kitchen wing, through the service corridor, through the door at the end of the service corridor that no one had used since his 14th name day, up the back stairs, around the gallery, into the long corridor that led to the king's study. He took it in less than 2 minutes. He arrived breathless. He arrived gloveless. The eighth petal on the back of his hand burned blue and steady. He arrived in the doorway of the king's study with Vesper Spire still wrapped on his back and his heart in his teeth. The king was alive. The king was sitting at his desk in the same coat he had worn at the welcome dinner. He was alone in the room. He had a small cut along the line of his jaw that had been cleaned and not yet stitched. He looked up when Roan came in. He looked at the door. He looked at his son. 22 days, he said. I'm sorry. You are 23 days early. Don't apologize. Sit. Tell me what you brought back. Then I will tell you what is on fire. Roan sat. He held his left hand out across the desk, palm down. The king looked at the blue eighth petal. He looked at it for a long moment. He nodded once. Good. Master Halden's house. Master Halden's house, yes. 2 nights ago, the 4 mercenaries from the Vance estate came over the wall. Halden killed 2 of them in the courtyard. The 2 he did not kill set the house on fire. He killed the 3rd on the stairs. The 4th got him in the shoulder. The 4th was the one who could fight. Halden is alive. He is at the temple. The wound is bad. He will live. He will not fight again with that shoulder. He cut the man's hand off. The man bled out in the entry hall. Halden's housekeeper put the fire out before it took the upper floor. We lost 2 of the quiet 63. There are 61. The other 59 are accounted for and at their posts. The Duchess of Vance is in her townhouse here in the city under guard. The Duchess has been crying since dawn yesterday. Lady Mireille has not been seen in the city since the morning after you left. Vale's estates are mobilizing. He has left the south. He is riding north with 3,000 men. The mobilization has been slow because half his bannermen do not believe him. He has told them he is coming to defend the throne against an attempted assassination of the heir. 11 of his 32 banner houses have refused him. He is in the central duchies, 2 weeks out, with the men he could bring. He has Maugrec with him. Maugrec was returned to him on the road by the lieutenant you turned back, who has since deserted Vale with 7 other Dracaran knights and is riding north to declare for the crown. The lieutenant says Maugrec has not been right since the marshlands. The lieutenant is also riding to apologize to you in person on the grounds that he was on the wrong dragon at the wrong moment. I told him to come. I think you will like him. And Aurelian. The king's mouth tightened. Aurelian is in the cathedral. Roan closed his eyes. Since when? He walked in the morning after you left. He is sitting in the lower nave. He has been sitting in the lower nave for 21 days. He eats once a day when the bishopric brings him food. He does not speak. He does not move. He is the lower nave's problem now. The bishopric has refused to remove him. The bishopric believes he is on a pilgrimage. The bishopric does not believe me when I tell them he is not. The bishop you sent for from the southern sea has arrived. She believes me. She has been preparing the rites. She believes that what he is doing in the lower nave is waiting for you. He is. I know. Father. Yes. The thing in the foundations is awake. I know that too. Cedric has been hearing it under his floor for a week. He has not slept properly. He is hollow-eyed. He has been hiding it. I noticed 5 days ago. I did not tell you because the fast riders we sent could not have caught you. Roan, what do we do? What is Cedric doing now? He is in the lower city, with the bishop from the south. They are walking the 7 seals. They are reading the founding charters from inside the city walls. They are trying to slow what is rising under the cathedral. They are doing well. They are buying time. The bishop knows what she is doing. Cedric is doing what she tells him. He is. The king stopped. He took a breath. He is being very brave. He is good at that. He is. Father. Yes. I am going to the cathedral. You are. I am going to walk in through the lower nave, and I am going to speak to Aurelian first. Roan. I have to. He will let me. He has been waiting. He has not moved in 21 days because he has been waiting. He has set the field. He has chosen the chamber. He has chosen the time. I will not give him a different time. I will not let him have any more time than I have to. I am going to walk in. I am going to speak. Then I am going to fight. And Vale. Vale is 2 weeks out. He will not arrive in time. He may. I am going to ask Thornwake to fly out tonight and burn his column. She will not kill them. She will burn his supply train. She will burn his banners. She will leave him on foot in the central duchies with 3,000 hungry men. He will turn back. He will be too proud to turn back. He will keep coming. He will arrive late. By the time he arrives, the fight in the cathedral will be over. He will either find the kingdom standing or he will find it gone, and either way he will not have his dragon, because I will leave Thornwake circling the city until he is here, and Maugrec will not engage her, and Vale will be without a mount, and Vale will be a WRM tyrant without a WIRM, which is a tank without armor, and Master Halden's Quiet 61 will be at the gates. You have been planning this for 4 years. I have been planning this for 10. And Mireille. Mireille is the question. Mireille is not where she was. Mireille is somewhere in the city. Mireille will not show herself until the cathedral fight begins. Mireille is going to come at me in the cathedral. Mireille is going to come at me from behind. How do you know? Because that is the only thing she has left to do. The other two have spent their resources. She has not. She has been the strategist among them. She is the patient one. She will wait. She will appear during the fight with Aurelian when I am occupied. She will not appear as herself. She will appear as Cedric, or as you. The king stared at him. She will appear as Cedric or me. Crown of Echoes is the subclass that takes the voice and the face and the small gestures. She has been at this court for 6 years. She has had ample opportunity to copy both of you. She will appear as Cedric, I think, because she will know that I would hesitate longest for Cedric. She will time it to the moment Aurelian opens the seal. The king sat very still. Roan, yes. I do not want you to face that. I will face it. It is one of the 3 things I have been training for. The other 2 are Aurelian and the thing in the foundations. I have a plan for it. Father, listen. I have a plan for it. The plan requires that Cedric stay out of the cathedral until the fight is over. I need you to make Cedric stay out of the cathedral. I need you to keep him in the lower city walking the seals. I need you to do that for me. The bishop from the south will help. She knows the cost. Cedric will not want to. He will fight you. Father, please. The king closed his eyes. He opened them. All right. Thank you. You will come back. I will come back. You will come back to me, Roan. Yes, father. I will come back to you. The king put his hand over his face. He held it there for a long moment. He took it down. He stood. He walked around the desk. He took his son by both shoulders. Go, he said. Take your dragon out. Burn Vale's column. Come back at dusk. Sleep. Eat. Talk to Cedric. Tell him what he needs to know, and not a word more. At dawn the day after, walk into the cathedral. End this. Come home for dinner. Yes, father. Thornwake found Vale's supply train in the 2nd hour after sunset, in a long valley 160 miles south of the capital. The supply train was strung out along the valley road in a column nearly 2 miles long. The men were eating. The fires were lit. The banners were furled for the evening. Mogrek was tied to a stake at the head of the column, his great horned head turned to one side, his eyes half closed. He was not asleep. He was waiting. Roan brought Thornwake low over the valley from the south. He approached upwind, silent except for the soft thump of her wings against the air. He had asked her, on the way out, to do this without killing if killing could be avoided. She did it without killing. She flew the length of the column at 50 feet above the road. She breathed her gray fire, the fire that was mending and unmending at once, along the line of the supply wagons, and the wagons collapsed inward without burning the men, the canvas and ropes and grain and barrels disintegrating into a fine gray ash that drifted away on the evening wind. She did this in a single pass that lasted less than a minute. The men did not understand what had happened to them. The banners, the long ember-red banners of House Dracarin, planted along the column as bivouac markers, did burn, in the ordinary sense, as Thornwake passed over them. The flames went up the staves and were seen from a long way off. She circled at the end of the valley. Mogrek had turned his head. Mogrek had recognized her. Mogrek had recognized Roan. Mogrek had not engaged. Roan flew Thornwake a wide circle around the column, while outside crossbow range, and the second time she passed the head of the column Mogrek lifted his head and looked at her, and then he turned his head deliberately to the south, away from the city of Eldermark, and he settled back onto his haunches. Vale had not come out of his tent. Roan turned Thornwake home. They flew through the night. He did not sleep on her back. He talked with Sevis inside his own head about the things Sevis had remembered and the things Sevis had forgotten. He talked with Sevis about the dragons of Varine, who had been wingless and lived in tide pools. He talked with Sevis about a wife Sevis had loved for 31 years and lost. He talked with Sevis about the kind of small god that had drowned Irene, and how to recognize one, and how to listen to one, and how to mourn one if there was time. He had time. 28 hours of flight time. He spent it learning. He landed at the palace at dawn the day after he had left. He went to his old childhood bedroom. He put Vesper Spire in the corner where the wooden sword from his 9th name day had been before he had taken it down to the practice yard. He took the wooden sword. He set it on the bed beside him. He fell asleep with one hand on Vesper Spire's wrappings and the other on the hilt of the wooden sword. Cedric came in at the first bell of the afternoon, slammed the door, sat down on the bed without taking off his coat, and shook him. "You are home." "I am home. You did not tell me." "I came in last night. You were walking the 8th seal. Father sent me to sleep. You are going to the cathedral tomorrow." "I am. I am coming with you." "You are not. I am the heir of this kingdom, and the thing in the foundations is under my city, and I am coming with you." "Cedric." "Roan." Roan sat up. He was still half asleep. He took his brother's face in both hands. "Cedric," he said, "listen to me. There are 3 of them. One is in the cathedral. One is 2 weeks south of here with no supply train and no WIRM. One is in the city, hidden, and she is going to come at me from behind during the fight. She is going to come at me wearing your face." Cedric's hands went still. "My face? She has been collecting it for 6 years. And you cannot." "I cannot. Not if you are there." "Cedric, if you are in the cathedral, I will not be able to tell. I have trained for this. I have a tongue stone of a different shape that will tell me which is which. The stone will work. But it works in a window of seconds, and in those seconds I have to know in my bones that the real you is somewhere else. If you are there, those seconds will be unbearable to me. I will hesitate. I will hesitate for the wrong one. I will get one of you killed. Roan, you are walking the seals. You are walking the seals because the bishop from the south needs you walking the seals. You are walking the seals because Father needs you walking the seals. And you are walking the seals because I need to know exactly where you are, so that when she comes at me with your face I can look at her and know she is not you." "Roan." "Yes." "All right. Thank you. I am going to yell at you for an hour about this." "Yell." He yelled for an hour. Roan took it. When Cedric had run out of words and was sitting with his forehead against his brother's shoulder, Roan handed him the wooden sword from his own 9th name day. "Take it," he said. "Sleep with it tonight. It is not a relic. It is just a wooden sword. But you and I both held it when we were small. Whatever she shows me with your face, I will be looking for the boy who held this sword. Hold it tonight. Then give it back to me tomorrow morning at the 8th seal. I will leave the cathedral by the 8th seal when I am done. You will be there. You will hand me the sword. I will know you by it." "Roan." "Yes. That is a very brotherly plan. I know. I love you. I love you. Go. Walk your seals. Eat. Sleep. Tomorrow." Cedric went. Roan lay down again, with Vesper Spire under his hand. He slept until the bells of the temple of the city tolled the 3rd hour of the morning. Then he got up, dressed in a coat the color of dried blood, gloveless, with the blue 8th petal burning soft on the back of his hand, and walked down through the palace and out through the colonnade and across the cathedral square to the great west door of the Cathedral of Eldermark. He went in. The Cathedral of Eldermark was a building of 7 naves, a central altar, a high vault, and an underground crypt that ran beneath the entire structure in 7 concentric rings. The 7 naves corresponded to the 7 seals. The crypt had not been opened in 3 centuries. The lower nave was the deepest of the 7, sunk 12 steps below the floor of the main sanctuary, lit by a ring of beeswax candles that the bishopric had been replacing every dawn for 21 days. Aurelian sat at the center of the lower nave on a small wooden stool that had been placed there for him by a nervous acolyte on his first morning. The acolyte had not been replaced. The acolyte had been left to sit at the foot of the stool, eyes wide, hands folded, faintly humming a hymn under his breath for 21 days. The acolyte was alive, but not entirely himself. The acolyte was, Roan realized as he descended the 12 steps, currently a vessel into which Aurelian had been pouring his own surplus ether for 3 weeks, so that he could sit unmoving without burning his own reserves. Roan stopped on the 7th step. "Let him go," he said. Aurelian did not open his eyes. He smiled, the same thin, polite smile he had worn 3 seats down in the royal canopy at the tournament, and the acolyte slumped sideways off the foot of the stool and was caught by a bishop in the side aisle who had been standing ready for exactly that moment. The bishop carried the acolyte out without looking at either of them. Aurelian opened his eyes. "Welcome home, brother. I am not your brother. You are, by class if not by blood. There are only 3 of us alive at this moment. There have only been 9 of us in the recorded history of the world. We are very nearly a family." The smile widened by a quarter. "Sevis is with you, then?" "He is." "Good. I was hoping he would have the courage. He has been hiding from me for 8 centuries. It is good of him to come out. He is not hiding. He has been waiting. For you. For me. I have also been waiting for you." "You have." Aurelian rose. He was a thin man, taller than Roan had remembered him from the canopy, in a simple gray traveling robe that was not the robe of any priestly order. He had no visible weapon. His left glove was on. His reliquary glyph would, Roan knew, be a wheel of 11 petals, 8 blue, 3 red. The 3 reds were the petals that signified items still being sought. The 8 blues were the items found. 8 blue petals on Aurelian's hand against 8 on Roan's. They were level. They were level in petals. They were not level in time. "Tell me," Aurelian said pleasantly. "Did Sevis tell you about Irene?" "Yes." "Did he tell you that I asked him to die?" "Yes." "Did he tell you why?" "Because you believed yourself sufficient and him a mistake." "That is what he believed. That is not the whole reason. I will tell you the whole reason. I would like you to know it before we begin. I would not like you to die thinking I was cruel. I would like you to die thinking I was correct. I am not going to die today." "No." Aurelian's smile flickered. "We shall see. The whole reason, Roan, is that the world is a single instrument with a single string, and the reliquary is the hand on the string. A single hand can play a single note. 2 hands fight. 2 hands produce noise. 2 hands have produced noise for 800 years. The noise has been small. The noise has been small because I have been very careful, and Sevis has been asleep, and the world has been forgiving. The world is no longer forgiving. The seals at the foundations of every kingdom I have walked through are weakening. The young gods bound under their cathedrals are rising. The world will be unmade in our lifetime. The only way to save the instrument is to take the string into a single hand. I have been alone since Irene. The string has been single in my hand. Then you were born. I had hoped to find you young and to teach you. I came too late. You have learned from other teachers. You have learned from Sevis. You have learned to play your own note. The note is the noise. The noise will destroy us. I am sorry. I would have preferred to teach you. You would have preferred to use me. They are the same thing, brother. They have always been the same thing. They are not. They are. You will see, in a century or 2. I do not have a century or 2. I have what I have. Aurelian, I am not here to be taught. I am here to stop you. I know. Step aside. No. Then come down off the dais. No. Come up to me. I have been sitting for 21 days. My legs are stiff. I will fight from here. He raised his unloved right hand. He flicked one finger. The candles in the ring around him went out. The lower nave went black. Roan had been expecting it. He had been expecting it for 10 years. The 8th petal of his hand flared blue and lit the nave with a soft, cold, candle-equivalent light that did not depend on the air around it. Aurelian on his stool, in the new light, was not smiling anymore. "You have learned," he said. "That is the petal of inheritance. That is the petal of inheritance. And you have inherited." "I have." "Then come." Roan unwrapped Vesper Spire and let the leather fall. The fight in the lower nave was the kind of fight that the chroniclers afterward could not agree on the length of. The bishop from the south, who watched it from the topmost step of the 7th seal, said it lasted 9 minutes. The acolyte who had been Aurelian's vessel for 21 days, who came back to himself in time to see the last 2 exchanges, said it lasted forever and a half. The king, who was in the cathedral square outside the west door and did not see it at all, said only that it was the longest hour of his life. Roan, afterwards, said he did not remember it as time. He remembered it as the 7 cells of Vesper Spire opening and closing in pattern Sevis had taught him in 28 hours of conversation on Dragonback. He remembered the tongue stone in the first cell singing under lies even as Aurelian fought him, because Aurelian's attacks were lies, half of them illusions, half of them not, and the stone sorted them out a heartbeat faster than Roan's eye could. He remembered the knucklebone of the Saint of Doors in the second cell springing open every time Aurelian tried to translate himself across the nave in the small step-through that high-tier reliquaries used to close distance, the door saint's blessing simply refusing the step and forcing Aurelian to walk. He remembered the vault WRM's heart in the third cell drinking Aurelian's reaches into the ether faster than Aurelian could replenish them, and Aurelian's face slowly changing, in the cold blue light of Roan's 8th petal, from the polite smile of the canopy to the tight, narrow concentration of a man who had not been honestly threatened in 300 years. He remembered the 4th cell, a chip of a sword saint's sword, which made Vesper Spire cut through any sealed object as if the seal were tissue, opening when Aurelian's robe revealed beneath it a vest of small bone scales that were each the seal of a small lesser relic Aurelian had bound into himself. The chip cut through 3 of them in a single stroke, and Aurelian howled. He remembered the 5th cell, the bell fragment, singing in a low constant tone for the whole fight, because Aurelian's body itself was a bound thing now, and the bell was working slowly on the binding the way a hand worked slowly on a knot. He remembered the 6th cell, which held the dried tongue of a saint of true names, repeating Aurelian's true name in a whisper that only Aurelian could hear, and the way Aurelian flinched every time it whispered. The 7th cell was empty. He had burned the seed in the marshland sky. He could not use it now. He did not need it. Vesper Spire was enough. He remembered, mostly, Sevis's hands inside his own. He remembered fighting forms he had never trained in flowing out of his fingers as naturally as breath. He remembered, at one point, taking a cut along his ribs that should have opened him and feeling Sevis close it from the inside with a small, dry, embarrassed cough. "That one is on me. I miscounted the inheritance fee. Give me a moment," and the cut had sealed. He remembered Sevis laughing in his mind, just once, when Aurelian tried a particular flourish that Sevis had taught Aurelian himself, 8 centuries ago, in their one and only meeting in Sevis's mountain hermitage. "He still does it with the same wrong elbow," Sevis had said. "Step inside it and hit him in the throat." I have been waiting 800 years to watch this. Roan had stepped inside it and hit him in the throat. Aurelian had gone down to one knee. Roan had put Vesper Spire's crystal head against the back of Aurelian's neck and held it there. "Yield," he had said. Aurelian had laughed. The laugh had been wet. "I will not yield to a child," he had said. "Then I will end it." "You will not. You have not the heart for it. You are too young. You are still your father's son." "I am my father's son. That is why I will end it." But before he could end it, the great west doors of the cathedral above them slammed open. A figure in the colors of House Pendrast, gold hair, blue and white coat, an Aurora Templar glyph blazing on the back of his right hand, came running down the aisle of the main sanctuary. "Roan," the figure shouted. "Roan, stop. Father is hurt. The city. Roan, stop." Roan did not turn. He kept Vesper Spire's head against Aurelian's neck. The first cell of Vesper Spire, the tongue stone, went black. It went black instantly. It went black with the sharpness of a snapped string. The figure was lying. The figure was Mireille. She was a perfect copy. Hair, coat, glyph, voice, the small hitch in the breath that meant Cedric had been running. She had even copied the bandage on the forearm from the tournament, and Roan, who had been at the tournament, knew the bandage by the angle of its wrap. But the tungstone had gone black. Roan did not turn his head. "Cedric," he said evenly, "where is your wooden sword?" Behind him, the figure stopped at the top of the 12 steps. There was a fractional pause. The pause was as long as a heartbeat. "What?" "The sword I gave you last night. From my 9th name day." "Where is it?" "Roan, father is." "Where is the sword, Cedric?" Another pause. Longer. "In my room." "Roan, please, you have to." "Liar," Roan said softly. He moved. He moved with Sevis's hands inside his own. He moved Vesper Spire from Aurelian's neck in a single arc that he could not have made unassisted. He turned with the arc. He brought the spear's shaft horizontally up across the top of the 12 steps in the moment Mireille, wearing Cedric's face, the wrong face, the face of his brother that her mouth had not earned, was raising both her hands in the gesture of the crown of echoes, the gesture that took the voice and the face from the living victim it was pointed at, the gesture that, if completed, would have left Roan no longer himself. She did not complete it. The shaft of Vesper Spire, the bell fragment in the 5th cell still singing, passed across her wrists at the moment her fingers were splayed for the gesture. The bell sang. The gesture unmade itself. Her hands fell open. Her stolen face slipped, just for a moment. There was a woman beneath it with pale eyes the color of a frozen lake at dawn, the eyes that had smiled at him over the first course of the welcome dinner. And then she was Cedric again, snarling Cedric's snarl, and she came at him with a long knife she had drawn from her sleeve. Roan took the knife on the 3rd petal of his glyph. The 3rd petal, the petal of holding, caught the knife in midair at his chest, held it suspended there, did not let it through. He took her wrist with his free hand. "You came at me with my brother's face," he said. She spat in his. He brought Vesper Spire down across her shoulder, not the head, the shaft, and put her on the ground. "Roan, behind you," she snarled, in Cedric's voice, even from the floor. The bell fragment sang. The illusion held. She was good. She was very good. She was Mireille and 3 centuries deep into the practice of it, and even on the ground bleeding, she could keep the face. Roan ignored her. The first cell, the tungstone, had gone black and was staying black. He did not need to verify. He turned back to Aurelian. Aurelian was no longer on his knee. Aurelian had used the seconds Roan had given to Mireille to push himself upright. He had used the next seconds to reach down through the floor of the lower nave, the floor over the foundations, and his glyph was no longer 8 petals open. It was 9. He had opened the 9th petal. He had opened it on Mireille. He had taken her crown of echoes into himself. The whole class. Every voice she had collected over 60 years. Every face. He had absorbed her, with the bell fragment still singing, with the door saint refusing his crossings, with the sword saint's chip cutting his vestments. Because the bell could only slow him, the door saint could only delay him, and the sword saint could only cut what he wore, and he had not been wearing his real binding. His real binding was inside his own chest. He had needed the second of distraction Mireille's arrival had bought him. She had bought it. She had not known she had bought it. She was screaming on the floor of the lower nave now. She was screaming Cedric's voice. The voice flickered. Then the voice was a woman's voice, then a child's, then a soldier's, then a woman's again. Every voice she had ever stolen, leaving her in reverse, and then the voice was gone. Mireille's body was on the floor of the lower nave. The body was not Mireille. The body was a small gray thing, withered, the skin of a 60-year-old over the frame of a 13-year-old, because that was the age Mireille had been when she had first taken a voice that was not her own, and she had stopped aging from inside on the day she had done it. She had been a girl. She had been a stolen child. She had been the first kingdom Aurelian had taught the crown of echoes to 6 centuries ago, on a small wooden bench in a temple courtyard in a country that no longer existed. Roan, looking at her, understood 3 things at once. He understood that Aurelian had been collecting villains too. He understood that Mireille had been a tool, not a partner. He understood, finally, that Aurelian was not 300 years old. Aurelian was at least 600. Aurelian had been a child taken by the previous Reliquary, the one before Sevis, and Aurelian had taken the relic net from him at 14, and Aurelian had been gathering ever since, and Aurelian was not playing the long game. Aurelian was playing a game so long Roan had not yet glimpsed the end of it. Sevis, in his mind, drew a sharp breath. That was new to me too, Sevis said. I am sorry. I did not know about Mireille. It's all right, Roan murmured. I see it now. He brought Vesper Spire up. Aurelian, opposite him, was changing. The Crown of Echoes was a soul-binding subclass. Absorbed into a reliquary with 9 open petals, it was not a subclass anymore. It was a capacity. Aurelian's face was rippling. He was taking on the faces of 300 years of victims one after another. A kingfisher-cloaked queen, a thin-faced bishop, a boy in fishing clothes, a woman with gold rings in her ears, and under each face was the same thin, polite smile. I will wear your face too, brother, Aurelian said. When this is done, I will wear your face for the next 600 years. I will be a good king of Eldermark. Better than your father. Better than Cedric would have been. Your kingdom will love me. I will save it. You will thank me, where you are. You will not wear my face. I will. The 9th petal is open now. The 10th is opening. The 11th follows. The 12th, the small god under the floor, will give me the 13th in the same breath. I am sorry. I had hoped to finish this without the small god. The small god will eat thousands. You have forced it. You have forced me. I forgive you. I will mourn them under your face. They will love me for the mourning. Goodbye, Roan. He reached for the floor. He reached for the small god under the floor. And above them, through the high vault of the cathedral, a black, 6-horned, war-trained greater WIRM crashed through the cathedral roof. Mogrek had come. Mogrek had come without Veil. Veil was sliding off Mogrek's back as he hit the floor of the main sanctuary, in full battle plate, with his great 2-handed sword in his hand, and the golden black of his house staining the cathedral floor with 3 days of dust. He had ridden Mogrek hard from the central duchies, 4 days of straight flight, no rest, no food, and he was haggard, his eyes red, his mouth a thin line. He had ridden Mogrek hard enough that the WIRM above him was panting in great heaving breaths and his harness was foamed with sweat, and yet Mogrek had carried him. Mogrek had carried him not because Mogrek had wanted to. Mogrek had carried him because Veil had finally, in his desperation, used the double-arm tyrant subclass's terminal binding. The terminal binding was a one-time forcing of the bond that allowed a WRM tyrant to compel any WIRM in his line for one engagement, at the cost of the bond afterward. Veil had spent his bond with Mogrek to arrive. Mogrek had carried him. Mogrek would not carry him again. Mogrek, panting on the cathedral roof, knew this. Mogrek's eyes were on Veil with a cold, settled, awaiting hatred. Mogrek's eyes also went to the great west doors of the cathedral. Through the great west doors came Thornwake. She did not crash through. She came in low, folded, landing in the central aisle of the sanctuary on her 4 legs, and she rose to her hindquarters there at the center of the cathedral with her wings half raised, slate gray and bronze-edged, smaller than Mogrek by half, and her single horn catching the cold blue light of Roan's 8th petal from the lower nave below. Mogrek saw her. Mogrek lowered his head. Mogrek did not roar. "Sister," said Mogrek, in the deep, slow language of WRMS that Sevis had once known and Roan now did. "Sister, I have been carried here against my will. I claim sister's right. Let me sit beside you." "Sit beside me, brother," Thornwake said. "Your rider is no longer your rider." Mogrek folded his wings. He sat down in the cathedral aisle beside Thornwake. Veil, in full plate at the bottom of the steps, raised his great 2-handed sword and screamed an order at his dragon. The order had no effect. The bond was spent. Mogrek did not move. "You have a WIRM bond, Vale," Roan said, climbing the 12 steps from the lower nave. "You do not have a WIRM. There is a difference." Vale turned. He saw Roan. He saw Vesper Spire. He saw, behind Roan on the lower step, the small gray body of what had been Mireille, and beyond her, Aurelian, with his hand pressed flat to the floor. Vale was not a stupid man. Vale had ridden 4 days without sleep. Vale had spent his bond. Vale saw, in the moment he turned, the entire shape of what was happening. "You used me," he said to Aurelian. "I used everyone," Aurelian said, without looking up. "It is my nature. It is forgivable. It is what the world requires. We will discuss it afterward. Roan, I am opening the floor. Whatever you wish to do, do it now." The floor of the lower nave cracked. The crack was a long, slow, geometric thing, a star, 8-pointed, with Aurelian's hand at the center. From each point of the star a thin line of light, the color of cold dawn, leaked up out of the foundation. The light smelled of salt and of pine resin and of the inside of a long-closed temple. The small god under the foundation began to climb. Roan took the 12 steps in 3 strides. The fight that followed was a triangle. Roan at one corner with Vesper Spire, the 8th petal of his hand open, Sevis's 800 years of inheritance moving his elbows and his knees, and Thornwake watching from the aisle with her wings spread. Vale at the second corner with his great 2-handed sword, his WRM tyrant subclass intact, his rage at being used by Aurelian sharper than his rage at being defeated by Cedric or anyone else, and Mogrek behind him refusing him. Aurelian at the third corner with the cathedral floor open at his feet, the 9th petal of his hand burning, the 10th opening, the 11th visible as a hairline at his wrist, and the small god rising under his palm. Vale moved first. Vale, who had been used, who had no dragon, who had no army, who had 4 days of no sleep behind his eyes, came at Aurelian with the 2-handed sword raised. He did not come at Roan. He came at the Reliquary in the gray robe who had spent him, and the great sword fell in a downward stroke that, if it had landed, would have split Aurelian's skull from crown to collarbone. It did not land. Aurelian, without looking, reached up with his right hand, the unloved one, and caught the blade by its edge. The cathedral floor did not break under him. His palm closed around steel and held it. His 9th petal flared. The blade in his hand began to corrode, the way iron corrodes in salt water over decades, except in 2 seconds, and the great sword fell apart in Vale's hands and clattered to the cathedral floor in flakes of rust. Vale, swordless, did not retreat. He drew the long knife at his belt. He came at Aurelian with the knife. Roan put Vesper Spire's shaft horizontally between them. "Vale," he said, "get behind me." Vale stared at him. "What? Get behind me. He will kill you. I cannot fight him with you between us. Get behind me. Your fight today is not with him. Your fight today is with my brother in the practice yard, in 3 weeks, when this is done. If you want it. You are mad. I am the only one in this room who can fight him. Get behind me." Vale, for the count of 1 breath, did not move. He had been a WRM tyrant his whole adult life. He had been the most dangerous man in the southern reaches for 2 decades. He had killed his semifinal opponent in the Heirs tournament to send a message. He had ridden a greater WIRM to ruin in 4 days. He had not been spoken to like that since he was 19 years old. He looked at Roan. He looked at the 8th petal on Roan's hand. He looked at Aurelian's 11th. He stepped behind Roan. He stepped behind Roan and stood at Roan's shoulder with the long knife in his hand, and his eyes on Aurelian, and his face the face of a man who had been used, and Roan understood. Sevis understood through him, with a small, dry, wry observation in the back of Roan's mind, that he had just gained an ally for the next 20 seconds. 20 seconds, in this fight, was the rest of his life. He took them. The small god rose through the floor. It rose between Aurelian and Roan, and it had no face yet, because it was still waking, but it had a presence, a soft, intolerable, pressing weight on the bones of every living thing in the cathedral. Vale went down to one knee under it. Thornwake hissed. Mogrek in the aisle bowed his head. Roan did not go down because Roan had Sevis's instruction in him. Do not bow. Do not bow. The bow is recognition. The bow is consent. And he did not bow. Aurelian put both hands on the small god as it rose. He began to draw it into himself. His 11th petal opened the rest of the way. His 12th glimmered. Roan opened all 7 filled cells of Vesper Spire at once. He had never opened all 7 at once. Sevis had warned him against it. Sevis had said the spear could not hold 7 simultaneous outputs and would burn itself to dust. Sevis had been wrong. Sevis had been wrong because Sevis had built Vesper Spire's design as a 5-cell weapon and had never tested it at 7. Roan, in the 4 years of his road, had quietly upgraded the silver flange around the 8th slot to accept all 7. Sevis, in Roan's mind, said, "Oh." Said it again. Said, "Oh, that is rather clever." Vesper Spire sang. The first cell, the tungstone, went white instead of black, lighting the cathedral like sun off snow, and Aurelian, whose every word for 600 years had been a half-lie, staggered under the contradiction of being illuminated. The second cell, the door Saint's knucklebone, slammed every door in the cathedral at once, including the door Aurelian was opening to the small god, and the small god, half-risen, was caught in a doorway that no longer existed. The third cell, the vault WRM's heart, opened to its full draw and drank the ether around Aurelian until the air around him visibly bent. He gasped. The fourth cell, the Sword Saint's chip, slid the head of Vesper Spire forward by 2 inches in a single motion, faster than the eye could follow, and the head of Vesper Spire was now level with Aurelian's heart. The 5th cell, the bell, sang every binding in the cathedral loose, and Aurelian, whose body was a bound thing, began to fall apart. The 6th cell, the Saint of True Names, whispered Aurelian's true name to the cathedral, and the cathedral heard it, and the cathedral's centuries of accumulated holiness, every prayer ever said within its walls, every benediction ever sung, every infant ever baptized, turned in a single moment to face him. The 7th cell, empty, had been seated by Sevis's instruction on the Dragonback flight home, with a single thing Sevis had not told Roan about until the last hour over the marshlands. The 7th cell held a memory. The memory was the memory of Irene, the memory of a small god rising through a cathedral floor on the night the southern kingdom drowned. The memory was Sevis's memory. The memory was now Roan's memory. The memory was so heavy that it had been the last weight added to Vesper Spire's balance. Roan released the 7th cell. The memory came out of the spear and into Aurelian. Aurelian remembered Irene. Aurelian remembered Irene from Sevis's side. Aurelian remembered the kingfisher-cloaked queen whose face he had since worn. Aurelian remembered the thin-faced bishop he had bought and ruined. Aurelian remembered the boy in fishing clothes whose voice he had stolen. Aurelian remembered the woman with the gold rings in her ears whom he had let drown to make a point. Aurelian remembered them all from outside himself. He had not remembered them that way in 600 years. He went to his knees. He looked up at Roan. "I am sorry," he said. It was not Aurelian's voice. It was the voice of the small boy Aurelian had been, before the previous reliquary had taken him at 14. It was a child's voice, in a stranger's body, weeping. Roan lowered Vesper Spire's head until it rested over Aurelian's heart. "I know," he said. He did not push the spear in. He opened the 8th petal of his own hand, and the 8th petal was the petal of inheritance, and he reached down through Vesper Spire and took the 11 petals of Aurelian's glyph into himself. He took them carefully. He took them whole. He took the 8 blue greater relics and the 3 red ones too. He took Aurelian's 6 centuries of binding. He took the crown of echoes that Aurelian had taken from Mireille. He took the small god that Aurelian had half bound to himself. The taking emptied Aurelian. Aurelian, on his knees, became the boy he had been at 14, and the boy at 14 did not have 6 centuries of life to support him, and the boy at 14 aged forward in 3 heartbeats, 15, 20, 60, 300, 600, and then he was dust. The dust settled on the cathedral floor. The small god, half-risen, stopped. It had no one to bind it. Aurelian was gone. Roan had not bound it. Roan had taken Aurelian's capacity to bind it, but he had not used the capacity. The small god, hanging half out of the cathedral floor, looked at him. It had a face now. The face was the face of an infant. "I'm sorry," Roan said. "Go back to sleep." "I'm sorry." He took the bell fragment from the 5th cell. He had been saving it. He had been saving it for this exact moment. He had not known he was. Sevis had known. Sevis had set the seed. He put the bell fragment in the foundation. He sang the small god a lullaby. The lullaby was a hymn in a language no one in Eldermark had spoken since the founding. Sevis had known it. Sevis sang it through Roan. The small god, confused, half-risen, with the face of an infant, listened. The small god yawned. The small god closed its eyes. The small god sank back into the foundation, slowly, slowly, until the cathedral floor was whole again over its sleep. The bell fragment stayed. The bell fragment would sing for the next 600 years, until the next reliquary came. Vesper Spire, in Roan's hand, was missing one of its cells. The 5th cell was empty. The 5th cell had become the new 5th seal of the Cathedral of Eldermark. Roan stood in the silence. Vale, behind him, lowered the long knife. He looked at the dust that had been Aurelian. He looked at the body that had been Mireille. He looked at the cathedral floor that had closed over a sleeping infant god. He looked at Roan. "I yield," he said. "To the kingdom? To the kingdom. Without condition? Without condition." Roan Pendrast. "I would have killed you a week ago. I would have killed your brother. I would have killed your father. I had reasons that made sense in my house. They do not make sense now. I yield. I will stand at your trial. I will accept the king's judgment. If the king wishes me to die, I will die. If the king wishes me to live, I will live in his service. The WIRM is no longer mine. Let the WIRM go to your house. He is a better WIRM than I deserved." Roan looked at him for a long moment. "Get up off your knee," he said. "We will discuss it with my father. Stand." Vale stood. The great west doors of the cathedral opened from the outside. The bishop from the south came in first. The acolyte who had been Aurelian's vessel came in second, still pale, leaning on her arm. The king came in third. His coat was creased. His jaw was set. His eyes found Roan, and the eyes were the eyes of a man who had been outside the cathedral for what he had felt as a very long hour. Behind them, breathing hard, his hair damp with sweat from running, his blue and white coat rumpled from a day of walking the seals in the lower city, came Cedric. Cedric was holding the wooden sword from Roan's 9th name day in his left hand. He saw the dust. He saw the body. He saw Mogrek and Thornwake sitting like cats in the cathedral aisle. He saw Vale standing without a sword behind his brother. He saw Vesper Spire, its 5th cell empty, in his brother's hand. He saw his brother alive. He crossed the cathedral floor in 8 long strides. He did not say anything. He shoved the wooden sword into his brother's free hand. He hugged him. He held him hard enough that Roan's ribs creaked. The 8th petal of Roan's glyph glowed against the back of Cedric's coat, blue and gentle, and at the 8th seal of the cathedral, which was the threshold between the sanctuary and the choir, marked by a low stone step. They stood holding each other while the bishop from the south sang the old binding hymn over the closed floor of the lower nave. "You're late," Cedric said into his shoulder. "I'm a day early. You're an hour late." That too. The king, 2 paces behind, did not speak yet. He waited until they had let go of each other. Then he came forward. He looked at Vale. He looked at Aurelian's dust. He looked at his older son's hand. 8 petals, he said. 8 petals. And you took his. I took them. They are inside the 8th. They are sealed. They will not open. They are part of the inheritance. They are part of what I will carry. Aurelian was a boy who had been hurt very badly when he was 14. He was angry for a long time. I am sorry. Father, I think I am. I think I am going to need to sleep for a week. You may sleep for a month. A week will do. Veil. Your Majesty, you will be tried. I expect to be. You will live or die at the kingdom's pleasure. You will not ride WIRMS again. The WIRM bond is broken. You understand. I understand. Then you will go quietly to a cell, and Master Halden's Quiet 61 will escort you, and you will wait for the trial. Are you a prisoner of war, or are you a guest? I am a guest, Your Majesty. Then walk out without irons. The escort is for show. Vale bowed. 8 of Master Halden's Quiet 61 were already in the doorway. They had been waiting for the king's word, and they took Vale with them out into the cathedral square without irons. He did not look back. The bishop finished her hymn. The cathedral floor was whole. The small god was asleep. The bell fragment of Vesper Spire's 5th cell was the new 5th seal. The bishop bowed to the king. The king bowed to the bishop. The acolyte, who had not spoken since coming back to himself in the lower nave, burst into tears and was led out into the choir by another bishop who had been waiting for that moment. Mogrek and Thornwake had not moved. They were watching each other in the cathedral aisle the way old siblings watch each other across a kitchen with a wary affection. Mogrek would, Roan knew, leave with him. Mogrek would live in the eastern spine for the rest of his life, alongside Thornwake, in the high glacial valley where Thornwake had been waiting. He would never carry another rider. He had earned that. The king put his hand on Roan's head. Come home, he said. Yes, father. Sleep. Yes, father. Eat. Yes, father. Bring your dragon to dinner at midwinter. Yes, father. Bring his dragon too, if his dragon will come. Mogrek, in the aisle, lifted his head and made a small approving rumble. He says yes, Roan said. Of course he does. Cedric, beside his brother, was crying quietly. He did not try to hide it. He had been the heir his whole life. He had earned an hour of crying. Roan put his arm around his brother's shoulders. He walked him out of the cathedral. The king walked behind them. The bishop walked behind the king. Thornwake and Mogrek brought up the rear, slate gray and black, side by side, their wings folded. Outside the great west doors, the cathedral square was full of the city. The city had been waiting all morning. The city had heard the cathedral roof crack open. The city had heard the dragons. The city had felt the small god try to rise and then settle. The city had not known what to do with itself. The city had stood in the square and waited. When the king and his 2 sons stepped out into the morning light at the top of the cathedral steps, with the 2 dragons behind them and the bishop at their right, the city went very still. The king raised one hand. He did not give a speech. He had never been the kind of king who gave speeches. He only raised one hand in the formal benediction of the House of Pendrast, the one that signified we are still standing, and the city, recognizing it, exhaled in a single great breath that rolled across the square like a wave. Then the city cheered. The cheering went on for some time. Roan, who was very tired, leaned against his brother and let it happen. Cedric held him up. Cedric was good at that. He had always been good at that. Behind them, in the doorway of the cathedral, Thornwake huffed a small white cloud of steam into the cold morning. Mogrek snorted in answer. 2 dragons in a cathedral doorway, half a kingdom watching them, and the 8th petal of Roan's glyph burning soft and steady on the hand that held the wooden sword from his 9th name day. Sevis, inside him, was very quiet. Sevis, Roan thought. Yes. Rest now. Thank you. Sevis settled into the 8th petal like a tired man into a chair, and the petal cooled by a single degree, and Roan knew that the next time he opened it he would know which thoughts were his and which were Sevis's, and the 2 of them would be friends, and they would carry the inheritance together for the rest of his life. He looked at Cedric. Cake, he said. Cake, Cedric agreed. They went home for cake. Epilogue: Midwinter. The midwinter dinner was held in the outer garden of the palace because the long hall was not large enough for 2 dragons. The king had ordered the gardeners to clear a wide circle of the lawn. The gardeners had complained for a week. The gardeners had, in the event, enjoyed it. Thornwake and Mogrek sat across the circle from each other with a long table between them. The table was laid for 9. The king sat at the head. Cedric sat at the king's right. Roan sat at the king's left. Master Halden, whose shoulder was healed enough for him to lift a spoon but not a sword, sat at Cedric's right. The bishop from the south, who had stayed through the autumn to oversee the resealing of the cathedral and to teach Cedric the old languages, sat at Roan's left. The lieutenant who had ridden Mogrek north on the morning of the 8th petal, the one who had deserted Vale on the road and ridden hard to apologize in person, sat beside Master Halden because the lieutenant was good with quiet old soldiers, and Master Halden had taken a slow shine to him over the autumn. Vale's chair was the chair at the foot of the table. Vale, after his trial, had been sentenced to 12 years of public service in the southern reaches under the bishopric's oversight. He had served 3 months of the 12. He was permitted to attend midwinter dinner at the king's house. He had ridden 3 days to be there. He sat very upright. He ate slowly. He did not look anyone in the eye for the first hour. By the second hour he had begun, awkwardly, to laugh at one of Master Halden's stories. The 2 remaining chairs were for Thornwake and Mogrek. They were not chairs. They were cushions the size of small boats. The dragons rested their forepaws on them and were fed roast venison from large wooden trays carried out by the kitchen staff, who had drawn straws for the privilege. The cook had won. The cook was beaming. After the venison, there was cake. The cake was the size of a wagon wheel. Cedric had ordered it from the same patisserie that had made the cake at his coming of age. The cake had 3 layers, gold, white, and slate gray, and on the top of it the patissier had iced, in delicate sugar work, an 8-petaled wheel, for petals red and 4 petals blue. Roan looked at it for a long moment. For red, he said. I asked them to, Cedric said. Because you have 1 more to find. I have 5 more to find, technically. 1 at a time. Eat the cake. Roan ate the cake. His hand, under the table, found his brother's hand and squeezed it. His brother squeezed back. The wooden sword from his 9th name day was leaning against the leg of his chair. He had carried it with him to the dinner because he had not yet quite let it out of his sight. The bishop on his left had noticed and had said nothing about it. The bishop on his left was a good bishop. The king, halfway through his slice of cake, set his fork down. Roan. Yes, father. You will go north again next spring. Yes, father. For the 9th petal. Yes, father. You will take Cedric. Cedric froze with cake on his fork. The king did not look at his younger son. He looked at his older. You will take Cedric, he said again, because Cedric has been heir of this kingdom his entire life and has never been outside its borders, and because the next 4 petals of your wheel will take you across the 7 kingdoms, and because I will not have my younger son becoming the kind of king who has never seen the kingdom he will inherit. You will take him. Master Halden will hold the regency. The bishop from the south will hold the cathedral. I will hold the city. You will be gone 6 months. You will return with 1 petal opened and my younger son better educated. You will return both alive. Is that understood? Yes, father, Roan said, smiling. Yes, father, Cedric said, his eyes brightening. Good. Eat the cake. They ate the cake. The dragons, on their cushions, 8 seconds of the venison and a small cake of their own. The patissier had made a smaller wheel-shaped cake for each of them, which they handled politely. The garden filled with the slow, low sound of dragon rumbles and human laughter and the wind in the bare midwinter branches above them. The 8th petal of Roan's hand glowed faintly through the white linen of his sleeve. Inside him, Sevis had a slice of cake too, and pronounced it acceptable. Above the cathedral, 3 miles away across the city, a small bell fragment in the 5th seal sang quietly to a sleeping infant god, and the infant god slept. Vale, at the foot of the table, looked at the cake on his plate, looked up at the dragons, looked across at the brothers, and shook his head slowly. I underestimated this house, he said. Most people do, the king said pleasantly. The lieutenant, beside Master Halden, snorted into his cup. The midwinter wind rose. The lamps in the garden swayed. The cake was finished. Cedric got up to pour a second round of wine for everyone, including, with great seriousness, a small bronze cup of warm honeyed mead for Thornwake, who lapped it from his hand with the careful courtesy of a guest at a strange house. And the night went on, slow and warm, well into the small hours, until the king, who was old and tired, and had buried a wife and raised 3 sons, because he counted Vale among them now, and would not be argued out of it, stood up at the head of the table and announced that he was going to bed. Wake me, he said, at noon. At noon, father. Roan. Yes, father. You came home. I came home. Thank you. The king went to bed. The brothers stayed up until the dawn talking with the dragons. Coda the wheel. The wheel of a reliquary's glyph has 13 petals. The 13th opens only at the end of a long life. The 12th opens at the moment of the 11th's opening, paired. The 11th, the 10th, the 9th, the 8th. These are the petals of the long middle of the life, the petals of the searching. The 7th, the 6th, the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, the 1st. These are the petals of the long beginning, the petals of the gathering. Roan Pendrast, 23 years old, Prince of Eldermark, son of King Aldrich Pendrast IV, older brother of Crown Prince Cedric Pendrast, bonded rider of the slate-gray WRM Thornwake, bearer of the spear Vesper Spire, inheritor of Sevis of Arene, possessor of 41 lesser relics and 3 greater relics, and the absorbed 11 of Aurelian besides. Opener of the 8th petal of the reliquary glyph and quieter of the small god under the Cathedral of Eldermark, had 4 more petals to open, and 5 more greater relics to find, and 1 more kingdom to walk before he could rest. He would walk them with his brother at his side. He would carry the wooden sword. He would carry the inheritance. He would carry, also, in the inside pocket of his coat, a small folded letter that the bishop from the south had given him on the morning of midwinter, a letter she had been carrying for 40 years, written by a reliquary scholar in a temple in the far western marches, whose final paragraph read, Asterisk to the reliquary who walks after Sevis. There is a 10th living among us. The wheel is not yet 2. The wheel is 3. The 3rd is asleep. The 3rd has been asleep since before Sevis was born. The 3rd is not your enemy. The 3rd is your sister. Find her. Wake her. The world has been a duet for too long. Make it a chorus. Asterisk. Roan carried the letter into the spring. That, however, is another story.